Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson, live on YouTube. Coming at you from the Mike Vrabel's part of the Bill Belichick Coaching Tree studio. All brought to you by FanDuel. And it's part 1 of 4 here, Sam. Going through all 32 teams, draft grades. Draft is over, and we're going team by team, division by division, starting today with the AFC and NFC North.
Yep, we had the draft. Now it's time to grade the draft. Let's go.
All right, so normally for these, we have Renee Bugner, who does have his composite draft grades, and we like to reference those. As of record time here on a Sunday morning, we don't necessarily have those, but we'll be going through team by team. We like to reference what the other sources. We like to reference the crowds, even though others might not.
We like to shift the blame from us, whenever possible. We do like to shift the blame.
I'm not going to put a D on a class, but someone else might.
Somebody will.
Probably Thor.
I saw
historically.
Yes, historically. That's the beauty of Renee's sheet, is that he puts together a GPA and shows you, how nice or harsh people are, and Thor is always the harshest.
Yes.
Though I saw this year, Hayden Winks is out here dropping Fs and E. He expelled somebody from school in his grades.
I saw that. I actually don't see the benefit in doing that anyway, but, that's a whole different story. All right, hit refresh on the stream if you're having any problems here, and hopefully it'll all be good. The internet's been working hard here this weekend during the draft. All right, man, you ready to go?
Yep.
All right, we're going to start AFC North with the Baltimore Ravens. They kicked things off at pick 14 with Vanga Ioane, the guard out of Penn State. They come back with edge rusher Zion Young from Missouri. Back-to-back receivers in rounds 3 and 4. Jacoby Lane from USC, Elijah Surratt from Indiana, adding some size to the receiving corps. They go speedy tight end Matthew Hibner in round 4. Chandler Rivers, the cornerback out of Duke, and a bunch of other players. I think, very interestingly enough, one of their 5th rounders, Adam Randall from Clemson. GM Eric DeCosta said that was Steve Bisciotti's pick, the owner. That was his guy. He did the work on Adam Randall. I think that's interesting that Eric decided, hey, don't blame me when this monstrous wide receiver running back conversion doesn't pan out. That's the owner's guy.
It's kind of fun player as well, though. It is interesting. Like, on the one hand, what the hell? It's a 5th-round pick. Let the owner do.
It's just funny.
Let him have one. On the other hand, it doesn't exactly scream good process. The owner just decided to dabble one day in the scouting and really like this kid, so he drafted him at the 5th round.
It's all part of the story, which is fun. So, what were your thoughts on this Ravens draft?
I like this. You want to feel old, by the way?
Yes.
You see who the Ravens signed as an undrafted free agent?
Ladarius Webb
Jr.
I mean, we were just covering that guy.
Not just cover, but like his whole career.
I know.
Like start to finish. He's one of these guys where we watched his entire career start to finish, and now his son is signing as an undrafted free agent. That's
some of the players who are now a little bit younger than us.
Yeah.
Having kids.
Who are now NFL players.
Yeah.
Man, that's tough.
I mean, Frank Gore's our age. We went to school at the same time as him. His kid, we've starting to feel older and older as you go through, though. All right, thoughts on the
starting to be older
on the Ravens draft here?
Yeah, I like this draft. The receiver thing is interesting. Like the Ravens, they've had this receiver problem, I guess you can say, for years now, and they keep kind of rolling the dice. They keep trying to find answers to it. They never quite work out. Even a guy like Zay Flowers, who's become a good player, still hasn't really answered that, who's this number one? Where's the Jamar Chase in this group? Yeah. Like, we need to give Lamar Jackson, multiple-time MVP, the one cast-iron superstar wide receiver to just, make this offense go to the moon. That's the guy they've never been able to find, whether it's Zay Flowers, whether it's Nuke Hopkins coming in off on the tail end of his career, other players, they just haven't been able to lock that down. It doesn't feel like either Jacoby Lane or Elijah Surratt will be that guy, but they're both interesting receivers in their own right. I keep coming back to Jacoby Lane. There's just something about the way he moves and the fluidity and the sort of physical talent that he has that's pretty captivating, even if, he doesn't get open as much as you'd like sometimes.
It's a similar story with Surratt. I mean, the criticism on him is he doesn't create enough separation, but he's really good in contested situations. I think he's got good body control, and even though he didn't run all that fast, I did think he looked more athletic last year than he did in 2024. So I was intrigued by Surratt, especially at pick 115 in round 4. Going back to round 1 here with Vega Ioane, he'll be plug and play at guard. It was a big need for the Ravens. They didn't necessarily address center, and I know DaCosta said something along the lines of, we liked the 2 second-round centers who went. So that was Logan Jones and Jake Slaughter, but they didn't see anyone else as day one starters. So a little TBD on what they're going to do at center. That's one of the questions coming out of the draft here. But Ioane is going to be the plug-and-play guard. I think in hindsight, if you're a Ravens fan, Reuben Bain was on the board for them as well, like some other players. I think that's always interesting, looking at the what could have been if that's the way that you want to go. But they did get their hard edge-setting edge rusher in the second round in Zion Young. So they go Ioane to fill the guard spot in round 1, and then Zion Young in round 2. With Ioane, he's a good player. He can move people at the point of attack. I think very Ravens player. They are going to this, zone-heavy offensive line coach. The scheme fit is interesting. Like I think scheme fit stuff can be very overrated at times, and I know NFL people hate saying that. I'm not saying it's not rated. I just mean I just think it's overrated. But in this case, we're at the extreme end of if they're going to move to way more wide zone. Ioane is not the classic guard for that, but when he's working downhill, he can absolutely move people. When he's in pass protection, he just stones people. He's very strong. I worry about him against quickness, undersized defensive tackles, and then I love looking at the division battles, as I mentioned on the live stream on Thursday night. Him and Dexter Lawrence going head-to-head. If Dexter's, he's not going to be facing a center the entire time, but Ioane's strength against Dexter Lawrence and his strength is going to be a fun matchup when they play the Bengals twice a year. It
is interesting, this idea that, I would have thought that Ioane doesn't tremendously fit a wide zone type of running scheme. Maybe the Ravens aren't going to do that. They brought in an offensive line coach who specializes in that, and it seems like has been very much, I only coach this. This is what I want to go with. This is what we run. But maybe there's enough pull in the building that they're like, you're going to have to diversify a bit, and we're going to be doing a bit of everything. But Ioane absolutely moves people in the run game. To be fair, maybe I just haven't misread a little bit or mispegged, because actually his biggest misses tend to come on pull blocks where he just looking to detonate people, actually whiffs on them. Maybe actually if you just get him, blocking the guy in front of him on a zone scheme, maybe that is where he's at his best, and you can latch on that way. You sort of hide the inability sometimes to correctly locate and hit your target. It's just an interesting fit. It's not an intuitive one that I would have pegged given the blocking scheme they're going to.
So are we going to make a call on the resolution here?
I think the video is okay. It was rough to begin with. YouTube seems to have defaulted it, where sometimes the stream is rough and it shuts it down to 240p quality. But if you bump it back up again, it seems to work now. I bumped it up to 720, 1080p.
If you're having stream issues, bump it back up, hopefully. So that'll take care of it.
Combination of refresh and then hitting the little settings button on the bottom and upping the quality to what it should be seems to have fixed it, I think.
So the Ravens, I think they would have loved to come away with 2 starting offensive linemen. I think they get 1, right? So Ioane comes in, John Simpson comes back at right guard. Still maybe have a question at center where they bring in Danny Pinter to potentially be that guy there. So we'll see what happens going forward. The other picks, remember this whole offseason with the Max Crosby saga and then bringing in Trey Hendrickson. Well, they go back to edge for the second year in a row in round 2 with Zion Young. And here's another team bringing in 3 different style players and body types. Zion Young, a longer, hard edge setting type, as I said before, wins with length. I think he could improve speed to power wise, but he moves pretty well. And a different style than, say, Trey Hendrickson, who comes in as their splash free agent. And then last year, Mike Green, who was forced to play almost 900 snaps last year. Looked a little overwhelmed as a rookie, but I think this helps maybe push him down to more of a designated pass rush role. We were high on Mike Green as a player last year. I think he didn't show well in year 1, but he was better in the second half of the season. The Ravens really needed to address this pass rush this offseason. So now with Hendrickson coming in, Zion Young coming in, and then Mike Green bumps down a little bit, maybe tighten up his role to 500 or 600 snaps. I think it's starting to come together for Baltimore on the edge.
Yeah, and Zion Young, I think, is a perfect complement to Trey Hendrickson as well. A lot of people said during the whole discourse of Hendrickson, Max Crosby, the whole dynamic in the offseason or earlier in the offseason that, Hendrickson's basically a liability in the run game these days. And I think that's a little bit strong, but he's definitely not as good as a run defender than he is as a pass rusher. So maybe the Ravens are looking at him saying, we want to limit how much he is on the field in run downs and, leave him more to just wreck shop as a pass rusher. And Zion Young lets him do that more.
And to be clear, I'm not going to list every single player that they drafted, just going through the players we find most interesting and looking at the draft strategy the teams had or whatever it may be. Round 4, they traded up a good deal amount to get tight end Matthew Hibner from SMU. Good speed for Hibner. So they have this is the 4th round is where they got Isaiah Likely a few years ago, and the guy I love from Iowa that just left to the Chargers. How did I just lose his name?
Kohler.
Yeah, Charlie Kohler. They lose their 2 4th-round tight ends from a few years ago, replacing them with Matthew Hibner, 4th-round tight end. He's more on the speed side, stretch the seam type of player. Chandler Rivers I like as an undersized corner to add to the mix in round 5. And then, of course, the Adam Randall pick, a guy that was a former receiver, turned running back, monster running back that is, keep an eye on him, the owner's selection here.
Scout Steve Bisciotti.
Scout Steve
Identified him, did the work. Yeah, he is a fun player. Like, he's an interesting guy, a big player, and just a sort of genuine playmaker right now. I'm kind of fascinated by that story. I'm not even saying I think it is probably bad to have the owner just dive into the scouting and be like, we're drafting this kid come what may. But in the 5th round, what the hell? Maybe every owner should get that. I'm kind of liking, this is how we should do it. Instead of comp picks, every owner should get one. Right, in the 5th round, we just have we reach the point, number whatever, and then every owner just gets one selection.
They should brand it. They should have the owner on stage
right.
on day 3.
We could turn this into a whole thing.
Yeah,
I love this. Maybe maybe after the draft, right? Maybe we get to
owner's choice.
We do the 7th, we reach Mr. Irrelevant, and then the first UDFA is every owner. Every owner just gets a pick.
I mean, Tony Khan runs the UDFA process for the Jags, or at least he has for years. I don't know if he still is with the AEW stuff, but that'd be the way to go. Yeah, you get Mr. Irrelevant Plus is the owner's round. Mm-hmm. Get your favorite UDFA.
And they have to be somehow, we've got to insulate them from the scouting staff. So maybe before the draft, they can only talk about first rounders with the scouts. And then after that, everything else is on you. You got to do the work yourself. You can't, scouts can't just feed you a name they want, right? And send you in and be like, select this guy. It's got to be your work.
So what do you think, man? Wrapping up the Ravens draft here, what are your thoughts, players, maybe favorite fits or picks or what have you?
I like what they did up top. I think, generally those first few rounds are pretty interesting. I don't have a good reason for it, but Jacoby Lane fascinates me as a player. There's just something about the way he moves. As soon as you saw him at the Senior Bowl, you're like, man, that guy is A, huge, and B, just glides around the field. His issue was, for a guy that's as big as he is, he doesn't play strong, at least not until the catch point. He goes up and gets the ball and can win contested catches, but he struggles to beat press coverage. He struggles to beat sort of physical coverage, which you're going to see a lot of at the NFL level. If he can just add a little bit of play strength in that area, I think he could be a really good player. But that's a flaw that kills receivers. So it's it's a classic boom or bust type of receiver, albeit in the 3rd round.
Yeah, I'm interested in the double up there with Jacoby Lane and Elijah Surratt, see how that plays out. Add them to the mix with Rashad Bateman and with Zay Flowers. If you just get, they brought in Tez Walker a couple of years ago. Just get one of those guys to emerge as the number 3 in this offense, and I think there's some value there. And then, Hibner and Josh Cuevas. They did go back-to-back, not back-to-back, but 2 tight ends out of 3 picks here, replacing the 2 tight ends that left. To go with Durham Smythe and Mark Andrews in there. So I think they hit some positions of need. I think coming out of this, there'll be some questions about center still, if there's 4th wave of free agents that they need to keep an eye on. And we don't have the composite grades here. My guess is this is going to land in the B range. I don't think anyone's going to go, I don't think the composite's going to be straight A or, C or anything like that. I think they're going to say, hey, look, solid draft from the Ravens and, filled some needs and picked up a couple starters.
Yeah, it feels like a fairly middle of the road draft class that nobody's going to hate, nobody's going to love. Let's see if I can actually find. Hayden Winks gave it an A- for what that's worth.
He did like it. Okay.
Yeah.
Hayden's all over the place with his grades.
He really is. He's gone the full spectrum. We've got an A+ all the way down to an F.
Class, I believe.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what it was.
We've got an A+ down to an F, and then the Rams got expelled from school.
Expelled. can't get expelled for drafting a QB. Come on. No one knows on the QB. All right, that's the Ravens. Let's go to Cincinnati Bengals coming up next. Did not have a first-round pick because of Dexter Lawrence. We do know that most draft grades do not factor in the trade, but will at least reference the trades and the reasons why teams didn't have a first-rounder. This does look pretty fun, though, once you add Dexter Lawrence into the mix. So
this one in particular, though, I think you have to actually factor in. I'm not saying you count Dexter Lawrence in their draft class necessarily, though I could see an argument for it. But this was as clear a case as you're going to find to team is sitting at a given draft spot wanting a type of player, does not see that player being available for them, and so simply flips that draft pick for said player, right?
Yeah.
Like the Bengals effectively were sitting at 10 going, we don't see anybody we want
because
at
they
10.
did it draft week. It wasn't a year ago. It wasn't, hey, we didn't know. We were just rolling the dice.
We run the Sims, and all too often a guy we don't like ends up sitting there at 10. Again, Brian Broada said that if they were stuck at 10 and had to pick, the guy that they might have picked was Peter Woods, who didn't go until like the bottom of the first round, right? So if they'd stayed at 10, I'm not saying that's a reason to do it necessarily, because what they were planning on doing was crazy, but if they'd sat there at 10 and drafted Peter Woods, people would have lambasted this draft pick. Instead, they flipped 10. They end up getting Dexter Lawrence, potentially the best player to come from this draft class, and then do the subsequent picks.
Bain's just the most obvious one, but this happens all the time. Like, if Bain goes nuts in the NFL and Dexter Lawrence, let's say, never really gets back to where he was, and he's, 2 or 3 years of, pretty good play but not great play, you might be sitting here 4 years from now being like, man, we could have just sat at 10 and got Ruben Bain.
And
again,
as it worked out,
to just keep an eye on him.
I mean, as it worked out, Ruben Bain went past their pick. Caleb Downs went by their pick.
Right. Both of those players would be the counterfactuals that the Bengals fans might be thinking about.
There were a lot of simulations where all of the defensive players were gone at 10, and the Bengals were just sort of sitting there going, do we draft offense? Do we draft Peter Woods 20 picks earlier than people want him? Whatever. As it turned out, Ruben Bain, Caleb Downs were both available. Maybe they had a defender that they liked would have been available, but they couldn't have known that when they made the trade. And, again, Dexter Lawrence is a monster if you get him back to where he was.
All right, so the actual picks here. Their first pick was in round 2, pick 41, Cassius Howell, and we'll talk about how he fits in to the So somebody suggested the body type buffet is what they suggested.
Buffet.
My way of saying you want to have guys with long arms, short arms, tall players, short players, fat players, skinny players. You want to have all different types of defensive linemen. The body type buffet was suggested to me by one of our listeners. Why don't you think about that for a couple seconds while I read out some of the Bengals picks here. Cassius Howell in round 2, Takario Davis, the cornerback out of Washington in round 3, Connor Lew, center from Auburn in round 4, and they come back in round 6 with Brian Parker from Duke, who was a tackle at Duke but a center conversion. And so they may have doubled up on at least a true center in Connor Lew and a guy like Parker who might have some positional value at center and guard. They bring in receiver Colby Young from Georgia in round 4. And then I really like the 2 7th-round picks, Jack Endries, the tight end from Texas via Cal, and Landon Robinson, the undersized Navy defensive tackle. I think those are 2 perfect 7th-rounders. A guy with some pass rush upside in Landon Robinson and Jack Endries, who the tight end, we could do a whole show, I think, on tight end evaluations and consensus boards and where they are, but I thought Endries was more in the first half of the tight end conversation rather than the second half, so I thought they got really good value for him in round 7. So the body type buffet now.
Well, that feels like something that belongs on a T-shirt that no one will understand what it means outside of the show, and it'll be pretty funny. I think that's good merch concept. I like that.
I'm going to let you rave about Cassius Howell and how much you like him and compare him to the Mustang and the whole deal. But the important data point here is that the Bengals had one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL the last 2 years, even when Trey Hendrickson has been on the field. 2 years ago, he was a stud, and they still couldn't get after the QB without him. So now here's what they're rolling with. On the edge this year, they bring in Boye Mafe. They had last year's first-rounder, Shamar Stewart. Bring in Cassius Howell. They have former first-rounder Miles Murphy. 4 deep at edge with Cassius Howell being dropped in there. Then you have Dexter Lawrence and B.J. Hill as your monster defensive tackles, and they brought in Jonathan Allen. Still technically have T.J. Slayton on the roster, Chris Jenkins, second-rounder from a couple years ago, throw Landon Robinson into there. Some of these guys won't be here. But my favorite thing coming out of the draft is when I could say, this team's rolling 8 deep on the defensive line, for the first time in a while, I think we could say that about the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I mean, they've absolutely overhauled it. The cornerback group, I think, was already in pretty good shape, and that will look better this year because of the work that they've done on the defensive line. So, yeah, absolutely. The biggest data point, though, that you haven't mentioned yet is that the Bengals did not draft a running back, which means I had to pay you $50.
They did.
So that was
appreciate
quite
you
upsetting.
paying up.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So that was quite upsetting. But other than that, yeah, Cassius Howell being their first pick. Look, Cassius Howell is a little bit like Jacoby Lane that we were talking about before. I just love the guy. I'm scared by literally the shortest arms ever measured for an edge rusher. There's no way of getting away from that as being a red flag. But for most of the process, he was seen as a consensus first-round player because of the arm length, the concerns about maybe run game, can he set an edge? He ended up sliding into the second round on the consensus board as well, gets drafted as a consensus, or gets drafted in the second round. But his burst is crazy. He's got bend. He's got all the tools for a really high-end pass rusher. And it's not that he can't defend the run. He definitely doesn't have an anchor. He definitely can't set an hard edge. But if you run a defense that, attacks gaps, that slants, that, slashes and attacks with penetration, he can defend the run that way. I mean, he makes a lot of plays against the run in the backfield by beating his guy with quickness. Again, we both saw this guy a lot last year when looking at, Shamar Stewart's tape, the other guys that Texas A&M had drafted, and Howell was the best player on that defensive line consistently. I think that was true this year as well. I've seen him make so many plays that I'm willing to bank on his ability to do it at the next level as well.
And he was there with Shamar Stewart on the other side, and, we keep talking about how when we were scouting those guys, Howell was the guy that popped, and we get to see those guys together again. A couple data points on Cassius Howell to just back up what we've seen on film. When I look at historic edge rushers who became what I define as solid or better players in the NFL, Cassius Howell well outperforms those players as far as college production, in overall pass rushing production, pass rush win rate, pressure percentage. I mean, he's in the 90th plus percentile as far as college production goes as a pass rusher, and then relative to other good NFL players, he's well above that threshold. Now he's well below the threshold in everything run defense related, whether it's disrupting plays, run stops, making plays at the line of scrimmage, overall tackles. In the second round, are you okay getting a designated pass rusher like Cassius Howell? I think you are, right? Like you said, it's not that he's incompetent against the run, but they're, like a Trey Hendrickson. Hendrickson's not going to set the edge. Like, Hendrickson's not a bad run defender, but he's not going to set the edge the same way Max Crosby's going to. But you could keep him out there. I think if Howell in years 2 or 3 has to play against the run a little bit more, fine. But for right now, with other people able to do that, I think he gets after the quarterback and adds just something that offenses have to account for differently. And, Shamar Stewart didn't have anything close to that level of production at Texas A&M. But Shamar Stewart's good at, I'm a freak athlete. I could bull rush you. I could compress the pocket. And so let him do that. I think it takes pressure off Shamar Stewart on the other side, even though he was a former first-round pick. And you'd love for him to develop and, get better and actually produce. But I think having the different styles will work. And then, making it all happen is your first-round selection of Dexter Lawrence pushing the pocket from the interior and being unblockable and literally forcing double teams between center and guard when he lines up in the A-gap. So I really like the way this Bengals defensive line is coming together.
The other piece of Cassius Howell propaganda to drop was the note from Todd McShay that at the Combine, he reached 14.5 miles per hour when turning the corner in that pass rush drill they do at the Combine, which was the fastest pass rush speed from any defensive line prospect since Will Anderson Jr., who hit 14.9 miles an hour in 2023, according to NGS. So, he has functional speed and functional ability to turn the corner. And as we said, he's my 65 Mustang, right? It's a bad idea. There's a lot wrong with it, but I love it anyway. And there's a listener there, Autumn Voyage, who created the picture of my 65 Mustang dressed up as Cassius Howell.
There's Cassius Howell. As far as the other picks go...
By the way, Yannick Ngakoue was the name that popped into my head as like a guy that never really made it beyond a designated pass rusher functionally in the NFL, but was drafted, I think, in the 3rd round, became a really good designated pass rusher for a while, hung around the NFL for like the better part of a decade. That's the kind of thing maybe how it could be.
That's actually the best comp, Yannick Ngakoue. And Ngakoue, I remember coming out of Maryland, was an awful run defender.
Right.
I mean, he wasn't.
Never really became much better than that in the NFL.
And he never was. And I remember role-wise, he didn't have any positional versatility. He was.
But for a few years, they played him like every down, waiting for him to become a better run defender.
But he was a classic 9 technique, a wide rusher, couldn't do much else. I think Howell's better than him as a run defender, but probably lands in a similar role. He's just going to be your wide 9. He's just rushing off the edge. You're not moving him around, but I think that's perfectly fine where they got him. Okay, beyond that, for the Bengals, Tacario Davis was really interesting. I think him going at 72, probably much higher than where the consensus board had him. But there was a point where he was at Arizona at almost 6'3", 6'3 plus,
6'4",
6'4".
He's like a freak. 6'4", whatever he is, 200 plus pounds, runs a 4.4 flat, right?
Yeah, I mean he's would I rather get him around later? Yes, but there was a point where he would
line. It's better than it was. It still absolutely needs attention, or at least needs theoretical upgrading somewhere along the line. So if you can find those in the mid rounds or on day 3, absolutely. And then Landon Robinson, the Navy defensive tackle in the 7th round, is just such a fascinating story. He was termed a little undersized, which may be a little underselling it. He's very undersized for a defensive tackle, but he does have that hustle, that pass rush ability. You've got to assume that once you get him away from Navy and into an NFL strength and conditioning program, you can change the body a bit. I mean, he's 6 foot. There's only so much you're going to be able to put on it, but you can probably pack on some weight, change his body composition a bit. I saw him being coached up by Aaron Donald at one point, doing some drills and stuff. That's got to be good for him. That's the player style. Obviously, Hall of Famer, one maybe the greatest defensive tackle ever play. That's the high expectations. But that's the player style that he's got to be at that size. Just hustle, disruption, winning with your hands, winning with your quickness. He's a fun player to watch.
And then agree on Robinson, and then just Jack Endry's getting him in the 7th round. Again, I feel like I could do a whole show on tight end value. And
somebody was asking for it earlier. Maybe one of our shows, once we get clear of the draft grades, there's a discussion to be had about what the hell happened this week with tight ends.
Let me do proper study on it too, and because I think the reason why the consensus board and the tight end picks don't match is because most of the consensus board, it's media driven and it's pass game driven. I think you're like Jack Endry's is a good smooth receiver, where if you get him in the 7th round, it looks fantastic. But the NFL is much less likely to take players, unless you're Eli Stowers and you're just special potentially as a receiver.
Right.
If you can't do anything in line, it crushes your value. And I don't think that shows up on consensus boards. I also think that's a pivot this year. It's also a
few things,
pivot.
Like everything. It's a few things coming together. It's the NFL suddenly pivoting back towards multiple tight end sets en masse, right? The Rams are a step ahead of that. Everyone else is now doing it. We're all pivoting back to tight end sets. That means blocking is more important. At the same time that it is a good tight end class. Like way back when we started saying this is the best tight end class to come along for a while.
In volume, not necessarily in high end prospects,
but like
in
depth.
In depth.
We've had years before where it's like once you're beyond tight end 4, there's nobody I even want on the roster. This year we were like, there's tight ends for days, right? There's millions of them. Now, all those things came together and everyone started jumping on tight ends in day 2. The run as well probably factored into that. And suddenly you're just getting tight ends that nobody even considered or getting drafted 100 picks before. So I think it's a lot of things that came together at once.
So I say all that to say, you're right. I think we should maybe do something this offseason and attack that a little bit more. Endry's, I thought he can make your H-back type of blocks. He can make your movement type of blocks. I think he's a pretty smooth receiver, pretty good athlete. I watched him and Max Clare back-to-back. I really liked Clare. I liked Endry's a little bit less, but I thought he was a good, dependable receiver for Fernando Mendoza at Cal, and then last year for Arch. Maybe playing for back-to-back number 1 overall picks, or playing with back-to-back overall picks. Colby Young adds some size and 4.49 speed at receiver in round 4. But I did like this Bengals draft quite a bit. And maybe Tacario Davis comes off the board a little bit higher. I'll just say coming out of this draft compared to last year where the Bengals had 6 picks and they used 2 on linebackers and 1 on a late round running back. He's still with us. So they had 6 picks. 2 were linebackers. 1 was a running back.
Better be good, given he cost me $50.
They felt good enough about their running back room that they didn't draft a running back. Thank you, guys. I think Bengals fans are feeling much better about this draft, especially when you look at Dexter Lawrence as the guy that they got at pick 10. I think you're feeling much better about the players you got, the positions that you drafted, and the overall roster construction of, hey, there's a play here where maybe there's future starters from rounds 3 and beyond, and a bunch of players that I think can at least contribute, and they've continued to load it up on this defensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty solid. Let me find the third round just to find out. Yeah, it's Carrie Davis. I mean, it was seen as a bit of a reach relative to the board, but not a massive one. Not particularly out of line for the rest of the third round.
Yeah, I like it there. Like I said, I have to go back to test my own theories on guys who were the 100 people that were once thought of as first rounders if they end up in round 3, if that matters. But Davis at least has some size and movement skills to justify that pick.
In a world where the Jags and Texans were drafting, that doesn't really register as a reach this year.
Perfect. That's true. All right, that's the Bengals. Let's go Cleveland Browns. Really like a lot of what the Browns did. I think they're in our favorite draft bucket, right, Sam? One of our
I really like their draft.
So here's what we got. They had a lot of picks, but it started. They had pick 6. They traded down to pick 9. When that happened, we theorized, hey, we think they were in on Spencer Fano. Maybe they would have loved Carnell Tate if he was still there, but he's off the board.
Yeah.
At 6, they trade down to 9, still get Fano, pick up extra picks. They get Casey Concepcion with their second first-rounder at receiver, and then also get first-round caliber receiver Denzel Boston at pick 39. So it's tackle, receiver, receiver. Then they get Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, one of our favorite steals of the draft, quote, steals, at safety at pick 58 in round 2. And then after that, more offensive line depth, Austin Barber at tackle from Florida, Parker Brailsford from Alabama, the Alabama version of linebacker Justin Jefferson, Joe Royer, good hands tight end from Cincinnati in round 5. And then they get Taylon Green, the quarterback from Arkansas. Man, if you could do some AI work and stitch together Taylon Green, Shadur Sanders, and Dylan Gabriel, you got something there.
Into one quarterback?
Yes. I'm telling you.
The athleticism.
Carson Ryan, I'm a big fan of all the 7th-round tight ends in the AFC North here. Carson Ryan, a good 7th-round tight end option, showed well in a lot of the production metrics here. Really nice draft, I'd say, overall from the Browns.
Yeah. In the second year in a row, generally, I like process-wise what they've been doing. I think it's worked. It's worked out in differing ways over the last couple of years, but I don't think you can really fault the process that much, even though people seem to like hating on it. I don't know whether they were loving Carnell Tate, and if that would have changed what they were doing at the top of the draft, but once the Titans selected him at 4 and he was out of consideration at 6, to me it's a no-brainer I would have drafted Spencer Fano at 6, but if you could trade back 3 spots and still get Spencer Fano, all the better, and that's what they were able to do. Fano, I think, is the best offensive lineman in this draft. I think he's also capable of playing all 5 positions, given what the Browns have on the roster already. Presumably he steps in and plays day 1 at left tackle, but theoretically he can upgrade one of your 5 offensive line spots and figure out where the biggest need is down the line if you need to. The 2 receivers are kind of fascinating because there's a missing thing to both of them. There's like a concern or a question mark to each of them. In a weird way, they're almost opposites. They almost complement each other, like one's strong where the other's weak and vice versa. Concepcion is, I think, the best route runner in this draft. He's really good after the catch. He's smooth. He can get open consistently. He makes people look ridiculous consistently. His ball skills are a question mark. And the question mark is not necessarily a massive negative or a massive prohibitive problem. He's seen a lot of passes come his way, and he's made some spectacular plays on those passes. But there's also a consistent thread of there have been drops throughout his career. There have been some alligator arm stuff over the middle when he's led into tight windows. Doesn't like that much. There have been some catch point issues, some sort of performative, let's go up and pretend I'm going for this ball. And then he jumps when he instead of just catching it in stride thing. It's just got this whole constant theme of general ball skill concerns, but only relative to like the best players at receiver, right? Like relative to Denzel Boston, his ball skills aren't good. Relative to Carnell Tate, his ball skills aren't good. But I don't know that they're bad enough that you say it offsets all the things he's amazing at. And that's what the Browns are banking on. Like he will get open as well as any receiver in this draft. And if his ball skills are good enough, then he'll be an impactful player.
Yeah, I'm with you on the differences here. We used to joke about Terry Fontenot when he was with the Falcons that he gave us just great case studies.
Yeah.
When it came to the draft, I think this is one of the fun ones, right? Two guys. Boston was mocked in the 20s throughout the entire process. Concepcion was mocked in the 20s. Now they're teammates with different types of skill sets. I think Boston gets maybe knocked a little bit too much just for being a big-bodied receiver.
Yeah.
And those guys have had a difficult run of it over the last few years, so you just assume that he's the next big-bodied receiver that can't separate and only is a contested catch guy. But I think he's really good hands. Again, like opposite stuff as Concepcion. He's not as dynamic, more dependable and contested, or just overall ball skills. I think he tracks the ball extremely well.
Yeah.
I think he's got a good feel for the position overall. He's just not twitched up and dynamic, even though I still think he could separate better than maybe the Keon Coleman's of the world and N'Keal Harry's of the world from the last 7 or 8 years.
Particularly vertically. Like, that's the thing where I think that he probably doesn't get enough credit. But, like, they are opposites. Like, his ball skills are off the charts good, strong hands, amazingly good at the catch point, tracks the ball well. All the things that Concepcion has at least a question mark about it. Denzel Boston is really good. His question is, can he separate? And most people, I think, were reasonably negative on his ability to separate. I think he actually separates vertically reasonably well. I think he can go past people with that size as long as he's able to avoid or gets better at avoiding contact through the route, press coverage, that kind of thing. He tends to want to attack that physically and just out-muscle the guy because he's big. If he learns a little bit of nuance in how actually the best thing for you, even at your size, might be to try and avoid the contact sometimes instead of taking it and running through it, I think he can separate vertically, and that's a big differentiator from a guy like Keon Coleman, who just doesn't separate anywhere. I think Boston can actually separate deep down the field, and that becomes a huge thing and a huge feather in his cap.
So the whole time we said, are they going to go receiver, tackle, tackle, receiver?
And they did.
They go tackle, receiver, receiver.
Yes.
So you double up at that. Emmanuel McNeil Warren, the safety out of Toledo. By the way, maybe I'm contradicting myself. I'm my best player available, don't feel the needs and everything. I think with the Browns, the board was going to line up there, and they're value positions, right? I mean, I like to say don't fill needs if you just need a starting linebacker or need a starting safety. Don't just force the lower value positions and, hit a starter there over other positions. They needed offensive line help. They needed receiver help. I want to read out their offensive line overhaul because they had like a half of a starter coming into free agency in DeJuan Jones, and it's completely different. But Emmanuel McNeil Warren's really good value, I'd say, in the second round. Add him into the mix as a guy that with good size and does everything pretty well, I would say, at safety. I think he could really do some damage in and around the line of scrimmage. They go back to the offensive line well with Austin Barber and Parker Brailsford. Again, they're too deep at offensive line. Is completely overhauled from where it was a month and a half ago when we started free agency. Justin Jefferson at linebacker I thought was an interesting player. He really popped in the college football playoff in their loss to Oklahoma. And they doubled up at tight end as well with Joe Royer and Carson Ryan. Again, Ryan, statistical profile looks pretty good. Royer has really good hands, does everything pretty well at tight end. And then they were the team that rolled the dice on Taylon Green, who is everyone's favorite, quote, upside quarterback because he's got a Colin Kaepernick-like body and gait and speed, right? He's got that piece of it. He's extremely fast. And, between Boise State and Arkansas, always had this tool set that was fun to watch, just never really put it all together. But, in a weak quarterback class, if you're going to take the upside guy, it's Taylon Green. And I'm telling you, there's nothing like the differences between Shedeur, who's the point guard, distributor, pretty accurate, but nothing special tools-wise. Dylan Gabriel, who's undersized but uber productive, and again, good enough arm, I would say, despite what it looked like last year. And then Taylon Green, who's just the IKEA light quarterback here for you. Just a fun mix, fun quarterback room here for the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that. I'm not sure he's a quarterback at all because I think the deficiencies in his passing game may be disqualifying. But the athletic thing is nuts, right? Like his athleticism is off the charts. This is as close as you're going to get, I think, to just drafting an athlete. No, the closest you can get to drafting an athlete is what the Eagles did in the 7th round with Uar Bernard, the Nigerian.
That's just a pure,
who's literally just an athlete,
straight line athlete
who has genuinely never played football. That's as close you get to drafting an athlete. This is as close as you get to drafting an athlete who's actually played something at the NFL or at the college level, and is just potentially a different maker. But he's the guy where, you go to the Senior Bowl, you see these guys up in person. When he like takes off, I mean, he is remarkably impressive as an athlete. He is huge and he is fast, and that's what they're banking on. I mean, 6'6", 230 pounds, who runs a 4.36 with a 1.55 split with a 43-something inch vertical jump. Like, if you put him as an athlete in the mock draftables chart, right? He's a 98th percentile broad jump, 99th percentile vertical jump, 97th percentile 40-yard dash, 95th percentile arm length. I don't know that he's a quarterback for them. I think they've just said, this is genuinely one of the most impressive athletes in the draft at any position, period. And he's available deep into this. Plus, he's got a cannon for an arm. And even if what if he becomes... what's the guy's name? The Bengals receiver that had like a perfect passer rating for his career every now and again.
Mohamed Sanu.
Mohamed Sanu. What if he becomes Mohamed Sanu, right? A guy that can play wide receiver.
Kind of a high standard as a passer.
Sure.
To Sanu.
But yeah, that's true. A guy who can become a receiver for us, and then every now and again we have a gadget play where he throws the ball 60 yards downfield to, whoever. To KC Concepcion, apparently.
So it's fun. It's fun. I don't know if he's going to do anything, but it's fun, at least. I'm going to do one more thing that I hate, but I'm going to do it anyway. Would people just compare workouts? I mentioned Carson Ryan, the 7th-round tight end. My closest pure workout comp to him is Harold Fannin Jr., fellow Brown.
To
Carson Ryan,
okay.
The tight end. So they both ran a 4.71, had an almost identical 10, half an inch difference in vertical, similar shuttle, and an identical cone at 6.97. I'm only mentioning that because Ryan was also pretty productive, above average drop rate, missed tackles forced after the catch, getting open single coverage versus zone. He's pretty good in a bunch of different areas. So again, as a 7th-round tight end flyer in a draft where tight ends were all over the place, Carson Ryan I thought was in a good spot. He was way down on the consensus, but the data,
right?
He's an 87 draft score for
That's all you need.
And that doesn't mean, just to really clarify, that doesn't mean I would have taken him in the 2nd. That means where he's supposed to come off the board, that's the type of player you're taking in round 7. I think that's potential good long shot here for the Browns.
More fun and games with Taylor Green's mock draftable or athletic makeup comps, right? If you just go to skill position players and it gives you the closest comps percentage-wise, like who's the closest athletically to him, the list is Calvin Johnson and all of the freak athlete wide receivers that were terrible football players that everybody kept drafting because of Calvin Johnson, right? So it's like he's either going to be Megatron, which is unlikely, or he could be the next Bryce Ford Wheaton, Jonathan Baldwin, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Chase Claypool, all of the freak athlete wide receivers that weren't any good, but people kept drafting because once upon a time Calvin Johnson showed what could be if you find a 6'5" guy that runs a 4.3.
I have him as Chase Claypool, we'll say.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's far more likely that he ends up being something like that than Megatron. But that's why you're drafting a Taylor Green to me, is he's literally a spectacular athlete.
That's why I hate what I just did with Sean Ryan and Harold Fannin, like what you just did when you just compare athleticism. It's like, well, they're completely different football players, though, which of course is the biggest. Like Calvin Johnson wasn't just a freak athlete; he was an unbelievable football player.
Yeah, I mean that's why he goes in with the top 5 of the draft as opposed to the 6th round.
Anyway, we don't have the composite grades right now. I think the Browns will show well. Depending, the only place where I think there's some variability, I think there's probably a wide range of what people believe about Fano, depending on the arm length. I think there's a wide range about what people think about Concepcion, a wide range about what people think about Denzel Boston, and even McNeil Warren. So all 4 players I think we like overall, but I also think there's probably a wide range of opinions on all of them because they all have a what if, either hands, separation skills, free safety skills, arm length, depending on the player.
Yeah, they were Hayden Winks' A+. They were the high watermark.
I mean, they loved Concepcion over there at Underdog. So I said I'd mention the offensive line, a team that had, I would say, not really 0 starters, but DeJuan Jones was the only starter at the beginning of free agency. You do have Titus Howard, who they traded for, Zion Johnson, Elton Jenkins. You add Spencer Fano. Center, you could have Parker Brailsford, Luke Whippler battling it out. They have DeJuan Jones there as a potential swing tackle, Austin Barber as a swing tackle, Tevin Jenkins in there. So they're 9 or 10 deep now on the offensive line with a reasonable group of mid-tier type of starters, upside first-rounders, and, swing tackles and backups. So I think they're in a much better spot O-line-wise than they were at the beginning of the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers, the biggest story for the Steelers here is that they were going to draft Mekhi Lemon. Or they were just calling to say hi. But I'm guessing they were going to draft him at 21 before he got poached by the Philadelphia Eagles.
There was a story out there that basically the Cowboys kind of screwed them seemingly deliberately. Like, they knew that the Steelers were taking – because obviously Mike McCarthy, former Dallas Cowboys head coach.
Yeah.
So apparently Dallas was on the clock. The Steelers were the next pick. They basically called up the old crew, right? And they're like, hey, who you guys taking? And they're like, oh, we're going to take Mekhi Lemon. And then so Pittsburgh's like on the phone with him. And then Dallas is like, Dallas calls up Philadelphia knowing they need receivers. And it's like, hey, Steelers are taking Mekhi Lemon. If you want him, we could do a deal right now. It'll cost you whatever. So they used Pittsburgh and the connections they had through the old coaching staff to then extort Philadelphia to move down a couple of spots and pick up a free draft spot. Apparently, Pittsburgh's not happy about that.
They're also not supposed to be calling him a round early. I mean, that's just
a pick early.
But
it was because Dallas had called them up and basically said, "Hey, who you taking in the next pick?" And they're like, "Oh, we'd like Mekhi Lemon." They're like, "You're good." Because we're not taking him, right? So then they get on the phone with Mekhi Lemon, thinking that Dallas is, they just called.
That may not have happened all on the spot, though. That could have happened prior to the draft or leading up to
the report was that's how it went down, basically. When Dallas was on the clock, they called up Pittsburgh.
It's also wild from Dallas's perspective, because the biggest story to me at that point was the fact that Dallas traded with their division rival Eagles. And every time Mekhi Lemon goes, 10 catches for $120 against Dallas, they're going to be kicking themselves. I think that's even a bigger story rather than them, screwing over their former head coach, Mike McCarthy. But here we are. They would have wanted Mekhi Lemon, which I would have loved for them. Instead, they did get Jeremy Bernard at receiver in round 2, which you love anyway.
Yes.
And then Max Honicher, the Arizona State offensive tackle in round 1. So there's some offensive line overhaul for the Steelers here. Honicher in round 1, Jeremy Bernard in round 2, wide receiver out of Bama. And then Drew Aller. What was he, QB4 off the board in this draft? They get Aller in.
After Beck, right?
Yep. Aller in round 3 at pick 76. Georgia cornerback Dalen Everett. They get the mullet, Jennings Dunker, at pick 96 with their third rounder. Caden Wetchen, return specialist from Iowa. We should have had Thor. Can we get the Thor video on him in the next couple minutes to get the breakdown there? Riley Nowakowski, blocking tight end in round 5. And super athletic Robert Spears Jennings from Oklahoma. Gabe Rubio from Notre Dame. Not necessarily in that order. I just decided to read every player now.
Yeah.
Eli Heidenreich as well. Everyone's favorite player in this draft in round 7.
Got Christian McCaffrey in the 7th round.
What a steal. If you're just going to do the disingenuous just use workouts. So your thoughts overall on the Steelers draft here?
Yeah, I kind of like this draft. The Drew Aller pick I get in terms of they wanted a quarterback of some description in the draft. They didn't want to go drafting Ty Simpson in the first round or anything. They couldn't anyway, given where the Rams picked him. So you take some quarterback somewhere along the way, right? Just roll the dice on a guy that you probably don't have a huge amount of confidence becomes a starter. I think they did that. I think Arizona did that. The teams needing a quarterback took a quarterback in the mid-rounds, roll the dice. The Jets, what the hell? It's not the guy I would have chosen, but I understand it, and I can't hate it too much because, when you don't have a quarterback, you just have to start drafting lottery tickets. The first 2 picks, though, I liked. Max Ihanicher, I get it. Like, he's something of a developmental project offensive tackle, but he's already shown sort of leaps and bounds of development. The tools are all there. Played different sports growing up, each of which affected his footwork in a positive way. Soccer and basketball, like you can see the movement skills attached to him, and he's big and strong and powerful. I like that as a roll of the dice. Anything that gets Broderick Jones out of the lineup gets my vote. And then Jeremy Bernard in the second round. Again, I kept sort of focusing on Emeka Ibuka from a year ago and where he went. But actually, the Mekhi Lemon thing's kind of interesting. Like Mekhi Lemon in the first round versus Jeremy Bernard in the second round. If you have a different position or a different player that you want to take in the first round, I think Jeremy Bernard is a fantastic consolation prize in the second. He might be the most instinctive receiver in the draft, just sort of overall. He gets to the right place at the right time, understands how to do it, and maximizes the quarterback's throwing window to him. And those are all great things.
Yeah, I know you loved him and getting him in the second round, and I like him as a compliment to Michael Pittman and DK Metcalf. I think that makes a lot of sense. The QB room is going to be fascinating for the Steelers with Will Howard and Drew Aller both over there. And we don't know if Aaron Rodgers is actually going to come back, but it's now back-to-back developmental quarterbacks here with the QB developer, Mike McCarthy. So we'll see what happens there. Let me circle back to Aller. Ahanacher, a lot of people did like him because he's very young at the position. He moves extremely well, showed well in the Texas Tech game against that fierce defensive line, which included Romello Height, David Bailey, of course.
He did the best of anybody, I think, really, against those guys.
There's some technique issues to tighten up, but when you're thinking about developmental offensive tackles, the reason why Monroe Freeling goes where he does, Caleb Lomu goes where he does, and Max Ahanacher all going in the first round, when the tape isn't completely clean for any of those guys. Especially Freeling has room to grow. Ahanacher has room to grow. But the fact that he's young at the position, has all the athletic skills that you want. And look, it's not about getting freak athletes at tackle, but you just want to see competent movement skills and balance and coordination. He's got a lot of that, right? So I think that bodes well for Ahanacher, and it might take him a year or two, but I think he can get there. So I think that's a good pick for Pittsburgh. Personally, I would have loved Mekhi Lemon and would have been interested to see what they did on the other end. It might be better, though, for them in the long run because the first-round tackle, it never – for a lot of fan bases, it doesn't feel great, but sometimes you just got to eat your vegetables. You got to eat your vegetables in round one. You got to get your tackles. You have to do it. And I know they got Broderick Jones a couple years ago, and it hasn't necessarily worked out, but it is so tough to find tackles. They don't reach free agency, and there's not many success stories beyond round one. So I think it's going to be a fun storyline to watch, the fact that they probably wanted Mekhi Lemon and Ahanacher was their second choice, and we all know that. Like you can't show up to the press conference and say he was the top player on our board. I mean, he was after Mekhi Lemon maybe was taken.
Show me the line.
But he was the second player on your board at pick 20, a pick ahead of time. And we'll see how it all shakes out, right? Dylan Cook filled in pretty well down the stretch. He's in the mix. Fautano's there with some guard tackle versatility. They have a spot probably they'd like to upgrade at left guard, and we'll see how it all plays out. But Jennings Dunker played left tackle at Iowa. He probably kicks in to guard, and you might have stolen a starter at pick 96, which is always one of my favorite things to do, is finding a potential starting guard in round 3. I think that's really good process. And Dunker, he's an okay prospect, maybe bumped up a little bit by the hair in the 40 at the combine, but I think 96 is a good spot for him. The Drew Aller discussion is this. The guy has a cannon for an arm. The beginning of his Penn State career looked pretty good. It looked like he'd be able to do something. And then the rest of his Penn State career was the media trying to figure out and Penn State trying to figure out, how do we get him to the next level? And they got him. I saw the stat that's out there the other day. Like, he's got one of the best interception percentages in history. It's like him and a bunch of stars. But early in his career, it was like, this dude's got a cannon, but he's too conservative. And then it's like, all right, we're going to get him a new group of receivers. It still hasn't figured it out. He's feeding Tyler Warren left and right 2 years ago. He's not going to the receivers. Well, the receivers are all pretty good too because they transferred to the SEC or whatever, and they were pretty good. So it wasn't the receivers. They brought in new receivers. It wasn't them. They brought in a new offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki, and he's supposed to be the next genius to unlock Drew Aller. It just wasn't there. So there's a lot of stuff missing, and usually when there's a lot of stuff missing, it's usually on the quarterback, right? It's usually on the quarterback. It's usually not the OC. It's not. I mean, those guys have an impact. It's usually there's something missing. There's accuracy missing. He's an okay athlete, okay pocket movement. Reminded me a little bit of Ryan Mallett. The way he's got this cannon for an arm, but he's not the most nimble in the pocket and has to win with vertical pass game. But he's inconsistent from an accuracy standpoint. But you pull out his throws, man. You pull out the flick of a wrist, 60-plus yarders, and you can get excited about it. So it's fine in the third round. Like I'm not going to hate on taking any shots at quarterback. But when I mentioned the QB room, I forgot Mason Rudolph is there as well. I mean, if they're playing a game next week, it's probably Mason Rudolph with Drew Aller and Will Howard battling for the backup spot. Maybe it's Will Howard as the starter because they just want to see what they have. But we might be in a transition season with the Steelers here, with figuring out who they have with one of those guys. But a couple developmental quarterbacks in Will Howard and Drew Aller now in the building for the Steelers as they potentially await Aaron Rodgers, which I don't know, is it less and less likely at this point that he's coming back? Who knows?
I don't know whether it's more or less likely. I don't even know if it's a good thing if they get him back. I mean, he didn't play well last year. Rodgers took a significant step back last season from even the play that he had with the Jets, which hadn't been particularly stellar. The dude's, deep into his 40s at this point. I don't know if he's getting any better, and I don't know if pairing him with Mike McCarthy is necessarily a great thing. I know they have familiarity and presumably some kind of positive affection to each other if they reunite. Otherwise, why would they do that? But remember, the way that ended in Green Bay wasn't going well. Like, it had stagnated. They were already, it's like, who's to blame for this? Is it MVP Aaron Rodgers? Is it Super Bowl winning coach Mike McCarthy? One of these guys is causing problems and it's not working. So I don't even know if they want him back necessarily, or if they should want him back. But the quarterback room is not good if they don't get him back.
Yeah, but I think that's okay, right? I mean, last year with Pittsburgh, they traded George Pickens after the draft. They got the extra third rounder from Dallas, which turned into Drew Aller, by the way. And we said at the time, look, they're not doing this go for it year with Aaron Rodgers. They've actually set up for, let's take a shot with Rodgers, but we're not sacrificing the future to do that. Like the Jets were sacrificing the future a little bit to have Aaron Rodgers. The Steelers didn't do that. They had this high-volume draft that they've been setting up for a couple of years now. Now you've got Tomlin out. You have Mike McCarthy in. I think you have a chance to reset things here and not just try to win 9 games again with Aaron Rodgers. So I think it's the time with a high-volume draft, a couple new offensive linemen, a new receiver. The defense is pretty good. I think it's time to just see what you have at quarterback, and I think they've set up to do that. And look, if Rodgers wants to come back and they want to have him, fine. But you got a couple options here to let them compete at quarterback, and if that doesn't work, you go back to the well next year in the first round.
It's kind of a shame that they don't have more than a 7th rounder invested in Heidenreich, because I'm kind of fascinated by what they would do with him if they had a bit more, reason to care, like as opposed to just, we'll pick a position, play him there, and if he makes the roster, cool.
His whole thing is he's got the same workout numbers of Christian McCaffrey, so we're doing this on for every team here.
Which had 1,000 receiving yards at Navy.
Yeah, but so he's a fun player. He's a running back in name because he played this hybrid running back wide receiver role there, but he's never really played pure running back. He's,
right.
In Navy's triple option system, but as an offensive weapon in the 7th round, yeah, that's fun. Let's see what happens there.
Right, but in the 7th round, the chances, like anybody in the 7th round, there's a better chance they don't even make the roster than they make the roster and contribute in a meaningful way. I'm just kind of bummed that they don't, because I would have been fascinated. We said it at the time. Look, he's not Christian McCaffrey. We only use that repeatedly because they had literally almost identical workout profiles. But we said at the time, like McCaffrey is one of the only running backs to come along that genuinely, I think, could have just been a slot receiver and played like that, right? Heidenreich's almost like the counterfactual. What would happen if you take that athlete, just make him a slot receiver and see how that works?
All right, so to wrap up the Steelers analysis, we did our favorite prospect video before the draft, and when the right player pops up, we might throw to somebody who had one of the favorite prospects. So here's Thor Nystrom talking about Caden Wetchen.
My favorite player in this draft class is a 5'9", 190-pound, 24-year-old slot receiver who had only a 6 RAS and had only 23 career catches in the FBS. But he is going to be the best return man in the NFL from day one. That's Caden Wetchen, the wide receiver from Iowa. Prior to Wetchen, no player had ever won the Jet Award and the Rogers-Dwight Awards in a single season. Those are the top 2 return awards in NCAA. Wetchen did it in 2024. Then he did it again in 2025. He holds numerous return records in the NCAA, including highest punt return average in a career. He had 4 punt return touchdowns. He had 2 kickoff return touchdowns. This guy's a dynamic weapon on special teams. He's a field flipper. receiver. You can score it himself. You might get something out of him as a slot receiver. Obviously, Iowa, the passing attack has never really been their thing. The quarterback play has never really been the thing there. But Weejan did show something down at the Shrine game in practice as a slot receiver. But irregardless of that, this is a special teams weapon that's going to return someone value on his draft slot.
I think grading-wise, that's going to end up in the B range. I think it's similar to Baltimore. I wonder how much people are going to hold the storyline piece against them in their draft grades, the Mekhi Lemon deal.
Yeah.
But I think overall people are going to like this draft. And Aller might, I don't know if that's the biggest reach, but I don't consider taking shots on quarterbacks reaches.
No, again,
when it comes to consensus boards.
He's not the guy I would have taken, but any quarterback in the third round when you need a quarterback of some description is fine. I mean, like I said, the Cardinals did it in the third round, right? The Steelers did it in the third round. The Jets did it in this draft as well. These are all teams who you look at their quarterback depth chart and you say, yes, they need a quarterback, so grab one. Like, okay, is it the guy I would take? No, but they see it differently, and I get it. I mean, look, we all – the strike rate and the ability to project quarterbacks is so bad that I'm never going to hammer a guy or hammer a team for taking a guy in the third round who they see something in, right? Aller's got the arm. Maybe he's the next Josh Allen, right? Unlikely, but what the hell?
All right, we're going to get to the NFC North in just a second here, but first, a quick word from FanDuel and Root. All right, right now, new FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, turn $5 into $250 in bonus bets just for getting started. And when every possession matters in the playoffs, FanDuel makes it easy to get closer to the action. From player props on your favorite stars to all the tools you need to back them up. FanDuel puts player research right at your fingertips so you can check stats, trends, matchups all in one place and make your picks with confidence. It's everything you need all in one app, so don't miss your shot. Head to FanDuel.com/33rd to get started. FanDuel, play your game. 21 plus in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org. Call 800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York, or call 1-877-770-7867 in Louisiana. Quick break to talk about our friends over at Root Insurance. Root Insurance believes that good drivers deserve better rates, so they've created a new kind of car insurance that rewards good drivers in an easy-to-use app. Traditional car insurance companies focus on demographics like age, zip code, occupation, and credit score to price your coverage, but when Root offers a rate, your behavior behind the wheel gets more weight than any other single factor. They don't use occupation or education level to negatively affect your rate. While you drive, Root gathers and analyzes data from your smartphone sensors, and after a few weeks, you'll get a car insurance quote based primarily on your driving. Save up to 44% off your initial Root quote after you take the test drive. If you need a tow truck, jump start, or lock your keys in the car, Root will cover the help you need to get back on the road when you opt into roadside assistance. The Root app makes it easy to edit your coverage, update your policy, or file a claim in just 3 minutes. You get started today at Root.com. All right, it's time to go to the NFC North, starting with the Chicago Bears. They go with former Viking Dylan Thieneman. Just kidding. Dylan Thieneman, the safety out of Oregon at pick 25, the guy that was mocked to the Vikings more than any other player. So fun story to track there.
I'd love to see the numbers on that, actually.
In the NFC
North.
What
percentage of mock drafts had Thieneman to the Vikings at 18?
Yeah, and he goes to 25 with the Bears, so that fills one of their safety needs there. Logan Jones, the center out of Iowa, is their second-round pick. They did some maneuvering in the second round where they had a couple picks there. They go tight end Sam Roush from Stanford in round 3, near the top there, pick 69. Second, third rounder Xavier Thomas, the wide receiver out of LSU. Malik Muhammad, the cornerback out of Texas, is their fourth rounder. They go linebacker Keyshawn Elliott out of Arizona State in round 5. And then Georgia Tech defensive tackle Jordan Vanderberg in round 6 at pick 213. Your thoughts on this Bears draft?
Yeah, I hadn't really noticed it before now, just seeing the class put together like that. But clearly they drafted athletes this year. Like,
Very
wow.
good athletes.
I mean, what an athletic profile this group has. Even the guys, Thieneman, spectacular athlete. Even Jordan Vandenberg in the 6th round, like former South African rugby player, which anyone that knows anything about rugby is basically a byword for freak athlete. Xavier Thomas, their biggest reach in the draft. He runs really fast. So wow, this team targeted athletes in this draft.
So with Thieneman with the first pick, again, we're joking about the Vikings thing because they, had the need and, Harrison Smith's retiring, but most mock drafts didn't have Thieneman falling all the way to 25. I think, he's a playmaker. He's fast. I think he's an excellent eyes on the quarterback, zone type of safety. Ran in the 4.3s, and athleticism for safety is overrated, as we've talked about, unless it shows up on the field. And I think his speed and ability to force turnovers, it all shows up on the field. So I like Thieneman at 25 here, and that completes the safety turnover on the back end of the Bears defense this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of made this point all the way through the process that he got comped to the Vikings or mocked to the Vikings all the time because Harrison Smith was retiring, but he's actually not a particularly good proxy for Harrison Smith other than being a white safety. Like, they don't play the game really that similarly at all. He's actually a much better proxy for Kevin Byard in terms of what he does and how he plays the game and what he's good at. And that's the guy he's ultimately, I think, going to end up replacing for Chicago. Like a true rangy free safety with sideline-to-sideline speed, and the guy who's going to play, deeper off the line and not necessarily be the guy you want in the box, be the guy covering, tight ends one-on-one, but that true free safety zone player.
So they complete the safety overhaul, as I mentioned. It's Kobe Bryant coming in from Seattle, and then Thieneman. So that was, there was a lot of people giving him Emmanuel Warren in the first round, or at least thinking of that as an option. I think Thieneman, some different type of player and prospected, as you said, more of the free safety type. When he's one-on-one, if you're playing a lot of quarters, if he's isolated with tight ends and receivers, I think he's not as good. But eyes on the quarterback, I think he is outstanding. I know Bears fans, maybe even producer Will, asking where are the defensive linemen for the Bears, because a lot of the mock drafts had, hey, your favorite edge rusher at 25, your favorite defensive tackle, Caden McDonald, right? If the chalk picks were Dylan Thieneman going to the Vikings and then Caden McDonald going to the Bears, or TJ Parker as edge, whatever it may have been, no defensive lineman here. And
the seventh.
Until
sixth round.
Until Vanderberg at the end. But I think that's one of the questions. I hate evaluating drafts by what teams didn't do position-wise, but it's probably a fair question for Chicago, for a team that had their run defense had some problems last year and their pass rush was inconsistent, but we'll see how that ends up playing out. Center, unfortunately, became a need this offseason when Drew Dahlman retired 1 year after signing his free agent contract. They attacked that with a 1-year deal from Garrett Bradbury and then taking Logan Jones in the second. So Logan Jones was the first true center off the board. He came ahead of Slaughter, I believe, right? First true center off the board, if I'm remembering correctly here. And Keelan Rutledge was the guard center conversion who went in the first round. So we were wondering what of the 4 or 5 actual centers from college football, who was going to go first. Logan Jones is the first guy. If you are a Bears fan, thinking, can this guy be our plug-and-play center? Eric DeCosta did reference that they were looking at Logan Jones and Jake Slaughter, that they thought they were the capable of starting in year one type of guys. So that was the expectation, at least for another GM around the league. I think Jones is a very good zone blocker, very similar to Bradbury, actually, with some strength questions. And when he's left one-on-one, he can get bullied a little bit, but he's got the classic Iowa center. Besides, Linderbaum's good at everything, but Iowa type of center, zone blocker, who I think, could play, but similar to, say, a John Michael Schmitz or Bradbury, where maybe power is going to be their weakness here.
Yeah, and Bradbury's good enough to be a stopgap, but I wouldn't want him as my long-term center.
Yeah.
And I think he's shown that across multiple teams at this point. But if you need to slow play Logan Jones and you need to give him some, developmental runway and give him some time to adjust to the NFL level, like maybe you start Garrett Bradbury for a while and then at some point you pivot to Logan Jones. So I think it's a good pick that way. Theoretically, this is the guy you're going to be replacing Garrett Bradbury with. Who knows whether that happens week 1 or week 10 or whatever. They've got the room to be able to slow play it. I think that's a good selection because you do need Garrett Bradbury out of the lineup at some point.
Will's asking for some Malik Muhammad hype. I will get there. I will give you some positives on Malik Muhammad in a second here. Let's talk Sam Roush. He's going to be one of the fun evaluations to keep an eye on. And let me start backwards. I'll start with my bottom line on Roush, and we'll work backwards, okay? My bottom line on him, overall, awful production profile, good athletic profile.
Okay.
But the production could be explained away by the difficulty level, ratcheted up to 10 by playing with poor quarterback play at Stanford, and then his inline blocking assignments, right? He had to play legitimate inline tight end, which from a production standpoint, if you're using something like a PFF and their grading and everything, it's harder. It's harder to block defensive ends, whether it's in college or the NFL. And this goes back to, why are all these tight ends coming off the board? Well, the numbers that people are using probably get skewed a little bit and not adjusted for assignment. Roush had a very difficult assignment. And by the way, wasn't awful at it. Like, he can move some people. I mean, if you're a Sam Roush fan and the Bears are sitting there in the draft room and they're like, show me the good, he's jacking up defensive ends, moving them off the ball. He's very athletic. He's got a couple really nice catch and run after the catch plays. The negatives and the overall production profile that I mentioned with Roush, he had more drops last year than Casey Concepcion, who is the guy that we say has awful ball skills in this class. So he dropped a ton of passes. Some of them were off target. Some of them are just right in his gut, and he's falling over and dropping them. So he's got some ugly plays out there. But again, he ran fast enough at 4.7, but his jumps and his change of direction skills were really good, and that shows up on the field with some after-the-catch plays. So Roush is going to be a really interesting player because I think he can get dirty in the run game. He'll get beat up at times, but he's going to hang in the run game. He's athletic, and he's tight end 3 with Colston Loveland and Cole Kmet, and with the whole league trying to run more 13 personnel, got to get more 3 tight ends out there. Or even if you're going to use 2 tight ends, you need more backups. You need more active tight ends. So that's what the goal is here for Roush and the Bears.
Yeah. The evaluations on him were kind of all over the place. There were people that hated his tape. There were people that loved his tape and had him as one of their favorite players in the draft. He's big, he's strong, he's powerful. He is the classic white tight end. He can do everything, be at the line of scrimmage. Problem is he wasn't consistent at any of it. Like, there were some awful plays as a receiver in there. There were some bad plays as a run blocker in there, but you can find the really good ones too. So no matter, it's almost like that, beauty is in the eye of the beholder thing. No matter what you think, you could talk yourself into Roush.
Yeah.
No matter whatever your preconceived notions were, you could back it up with the tape. And where he was going to land was always going to be pretty interesting.
So yeah, I think that'll just be a fun one to watch, I'd say, through the years. Malik Muhammad, the cornerback out of Texas, I liked him. I thought he was solid overall. That he moved. He's got all the players I like. One of my notes is always grabby. So he's got some grabby in there. But zone eyes, breaks on the ball, tackles, mid-level missed tackle rates. But I thought he's willing tackler. He's got some good plays in there. The athletic profile is outstanding across the board. Long arms, ran 4.42. Good jumps, good change of direction. In my numbers, right, so I've got my draft score. Overall, it's a 73.9, which is good for where he's drafted. The production's 58, the combine's 97.9. So that's in the combine stuff. I'm going to do this differently from, say, Raz and everything. I'm not trying to tell you how good of an athlete a player is. I'm telling you how well that projects to the next level. So he's got a really good combine profile or workout profile that projects at the next level. Let's see, workout comps here. Josh Jackson, Eric Stokes, Akilla Witherspoon, Shaq Griffin, Darrell Luter, some of the guys that showed up as comps.
Yeah.
But he's got, a little inside-outside ability, and he's, 3 productive years. And I thought he was a solid corner at Texas.
Mm-hmm. Xavier Thomas raised eyebrows as being one of those pretty significant reaches, but he runs a 4.2 something. So, again, targeting athletes. He's also got return skills, which is always going to be a part of drafting a speedy wide receiver in the mid-rounds.
So the word was here that Ben Johnson started twitching watching Xavier Thomas, that this was his dude. And then we could get to the whole my consensus board had him at 254. I think he was similar on Arif's, right? 260, 250, right. Whatever it is. So that's where we get into, should you take that guy at 89? That's why it raised eyebrows.
Yes.
And you're playing the market and you're saying, well, could we have had him at even 166?
A round later, say.
2 rounds later, 166.
Right, but a minimum of a round later. If you're taking a guy 100 and something spots ahead of where he's supposed to go, that's 3 rounds plus. You're telling me he definitely would have been available 1 round later.
Now look, of all the people in the NFL that I trust with a 4.28 receiver, I would say
Ben Johnson.
I would say Mike McDaniel and Ben Johnson are the two that I trust the most with a 4.28 playmaker. Now, I was partial to Brennan Thompson. I thought Brennan Thompson from Mississippi State, who at least had better receiving
later,
production,
right?
who went later. Now, I thought he would have been the guy, the 4.2 receiver, that would have been perfect for the Khalif Raymond role for the Bears. They like Xavier Thomas better. Maybe it's the return skills or whatever. But he runs 4.28. And I'll say this, when you add some gimmick plays to him, which Ben Johnson has, you add the deep crossers and the Khalif Raymond type of plays for Ben Johnson, we might look at this and say this was a really good pick, but you still generally want to play the draft and say, well, we could have had him in round 5, or we could have had him or Brennan Thompson. I don't know how they felt about Thompson. So another fun one to just keep an eye on here and say, look, Ben Johnson with 4.28 speed usually knows what to do with those players, and he could end up being a playmaker for them. They got Luther Burden. They have Roma Dunze. He competes for wide receiver 4 type of snaps and return snaps. It's just really high in the late third for Xavier Thomas.
Yeah. And then Jordan Vandenberg, the defensive tackle, becomes the first South African-born drafted player.
Let me try to get his workout, because his workout was out of this world.
35 bench reps at whatever it was, 310 pounds.
He ran a 4.94, so 310 was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
6'3", 310, ran 4.94, had a 98th percentile 10-yard split at 161, had 95th, 97th, 95th, and 99th percentile in that order. Bench, vertical, broad, and shuttle. Mm-hmm. Didn't run the cone, from what I see.
Former Bruce Feldman's Freaks List guy. You know the way, the sort of adage of like farm strength, right? Well, basically, all of South Africa is farm strength. Like, you find a South African rugby player, that guy's got farm boy strength and is a monster and is generally huge. So it's 6'3", 310. He takes all those buckets, all those boxes.
All the production numbers, below average. But that's, as a 6th-round pick, that's what's kind of fun. And then maybe as a project, getting him in there as an athletic defensive lineman. The only question, I think, for the Bears, do you feel good enough about your pass rush next year? Do you feel good enough about your ability to stop the run with your defensive line? We'll see, but intriguing draft by the Bears, and again, I think they'll be similar to some other teams that land somewhat in the middle of the assessments. Good on the Bears?
Yep.
Was that good enough hype there, Will? Do you appreciate that? Let's go Detroit Lions, right? Up next.
Yes.
Yeah. Blake Miller was their first-round pick from Clemson, 17th overall. They go with the offensive tackle. They go Derek Moore, Michigan edge rusher, in round 2. They go back to Michigan for Jimmy Rolder, the linebacker, in round 4. Round 5 is Keith Abney, the cornerback out of Arizona State. Their second, 5th rounder is Kendrick Law, the wide receiver out of Kentucky. Skylar Gill Howard, defensive tackle out of Texas Tech, is their 6th-round pick. And then they go Tyree West, defensive lineman out of Tennessee. So 7 picks here for the Lions. What were your thoughts on this draft?
So they had the Bucks draft, right? The fairway shots, all of them, just greens and regulation.
It was similar, yeah. There's some similarities there.
That's what we've been saying for the Bucks for the last couple of years, right? They just sort of it's nothing risky. We just take the fairway shot. We try and hit greens and regulation, and we just solid, right? The safe draft. This feels like a safe draft across the board. I kind of like that, given some of the players they've assembled, but that's the theme. Whereas the theme for the Bears draft was, let's draft athletes, right? Let's get a crazy group of athletes together, and that's going to be the primary driver of these selections. The primary driver of these selections appears to be, let's just get safe, solid, dependable football players.
Yeah, so coming out of the draft, I love the future evaluation stories and everything. There were several developmental offensive tackles, Monroe Freeling. So they passed on Monroe Freeling. They passed on Max Ahonicher. They passed on Caleb Lomu. Those are all your developmental type of tackles. They go with Blake Miller, the guy that's got like 4,000 snaps of football, 4-year starter, who doesn't necessarily have as much perceived upside, but is the closest to plug-and-play right tackle. And, we talked about this before. Like we kept putting Blake Miller in like the early second, and then you put him in the late first. And there was a point, I think I mocked him to the Lions at 17, thinking they probably want maybe more of the plug-and-play right tackle as they move Penei Sewell to left tackle, and that's what they get. I think Blake Miller grew on me more. I watched him. He's pretty good in pass pro. Will get a little lungy in the run game, but he's fine there. He's not a dominant run blocker, but he's just solid, good at everything. The solid of solid picks, taking him at 17. And it ended up being a big need pick here for the Lions. Their offensive line, which was one of the best in the NFL, is slowly deteriorated with Frank Ragnow retiring, with Taylor Decker out. And it was a need pick, but also I think it matched what where Blake Miller fits in this draft class. So that was their first round pick. Very much a fairway shot.
Yeah, I really like Blake Miller. I thought he was an underrated offensive tackle relative to some of the other guys. Again, maybe
But he's not a slouch athletically either. We're just like the Bears players we're talking about, like they're all like high-end athletes or high-end forwards.
Yeah.
Like Miller tested well, and that was one of the boxes he needed to tick in this process.
Yeah, but I think he is a good, solid player. Maybe the ceiling is lower for him than it is for some of these other guys, but I think he's a significantly better football player right now than some of the other players that maybe have this higher ceiling. So that the balancing act there is always, well, okay, these guys may have a higher ceiling, but what are the chances they hit that ceiling, and what percentage, that bell curve of the sort of range of possible outcomes for these players, like how high to the right or how far to the right do they need to hit on that range of outcomes to be better than this guy is right now, right? I think Blake Miller has a really, and that's, I guess, where the floor is or whatever. But so I guess Blake Miller, I think, is a very good player right now, plug and play. Lets Dan Campbell do the thing he appears to be obsessed by, moving Penei Sewell to the left side for whatever reason. Lets him do that and plug and play and rock right away.
Second round pick is Derek Moore from Michigan. That was a little bit higher than he was on the consensus. I think the consensus had him more as like a late second, maybe in the early third. But he was just a good, solid, dependable football player. He's got good power. Loves to engage tackles and maneuver him, wins with his hands, doesn't necessarily win with burst or quicks off the edge. Didn't really do much of his testing, but the couple jumps were below average. So I don't think he's a great athlete necessarily, but he is just a good football player who is a solid run defender. I got him as above average overall pass rush profile, pass rush win rate, snap for snap at Michigan over the last couple of years. So a couple Michigan bookends now in Detroit, with Derek Moore being the guy competing for snaps opposite Aiden Hutchinson. So this has been I'd say a multi-year need for the Lions, trying to figure out how they're going to fill that spot opposite Aiden Hutchinson. You've got Al-Qadim Muhammad with his 10-sack season last year. He's out, and they're going to try to fill this with Derek Moore, DJ Wanham, Peyton Turner that they're bringing in here. So I don't know if it's completely solved, but Moore is, again, fairway shot, good, solid player. It reminds me of the Chris Braswell pick a couple years ago from the Bucs, but I think he's a better prospect than Braswell.
Yeah. I think he's similar to Blake Miller, right? It's like, how high is the ceiling, but the floor is pretty high, and at this point, the Lions are surely just trying to find some kind of reliable source of snaps and pressure on the opposite side of Aiden Hutchinson. So let's just get a solid player in the building and deploy him, and we'll look somewhere else for the ceiling down the line if we need to.
So Moore, show some power, quick hands. From my notes, I was wondering if he's the type of guy that's only going to, maybe takes advantage of poor offensive tackles at the college level. So, again, I don't know if he's a high-end pass rusher at the next level, but I think he's your edge 2 type, and you get that in round 2. I think I'm going to say the word solid 900 times here for the
well, that's their draft.
For the Lions draft.
It really is. Like, that's what I'm saying. It's an unspectacular draft, but it's a solid draft. It's greens and regulation, hit the fairways, don't do anything crazy. It's there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that's the theme of this draft.
The other solid pick, another Michigan player, was Jimmy Rolder, and when we have it, he was one of a favorite prospect.
Yeah.
Of one of our guys in the video. Mm-hmm. Keith Abney going in the 5th round. He goes at pick 157.
That's the best value in this.
That's the best value pick here, and I'll tell you my favorite pick in a minute here. But the rest of their day 3 guys are at least bringing something to the table. I think it's worth it. It's very professional of us to just go sideways Lance Zierlein. Let's at least hear from Lance Zierlein on Jimmy Rolder. You're gonna have to tilt your head sideways because we couldn't fix it. But we're gonna throw it out there anyway because we're just scratching the surface. Let's hear from Lance on Jimmy Rolder.
Hey boys, just waiting for my food order here to go, this Mexican restaurant. I was thinking my guy this year is Jimmy Rolder. There's some other guys I got to come up with, but let me tell you about Jimmy Rolder from Michigan, linebacker. Tackles like a mother. I mean, once he gets you in the grasp, it's hard to get away. He's extremely strong. This guy started 1 year, and I couldn't believe how instinctive and how consistent he was as a 1 year linebacker at Michigan. So that's the guy. He may get drafted in like the 5th round. To me, he's more like a 3rd rounder. I think he's going to be a good special teams player. I think Jimmy Rolder is somebody that I'd pound the table for on day 3 if we needed a linebacker.
You sound like a Dan Campbell guy, or what? Mm-hmm. So that's Jimmy Rolder, and then yes, we got Keith Abney, 2nd round value consensus wise, getting him in the 5th, and chance to compete at corner for the Lions.
Yeah, again, another Detroit Lions type of player, right? So number one, they're sort of targeting these solid players that maybe don't have a spectacular ceiling, but are just good football players and contributors. The other thing they're targeting is guys that mix it up and are feisty and are tough, like, again, classic Dan Campbell type of players, right? Kneecap biters. Keith Abney is that type of player, right? Feisty, physical, aggressive corner. Maybe if you're, what's his issue? Does he have the speed, the quickness, the overall top-end athleticism, and is he kind of locked into a specific role? But he's a Detroit type of player.
I like the way he hits. I thought he was fluid enough as a mover. 4.38 shuttle was a little surprising. I thought he looked better on film, movement-wise, than that number. He had a weird shuttle-cone mix where the cone was good, shuttle wasn't good. I think he's got a pretty good feel for playing cover 2, playing zone, coming up to hit. So, yeah, I think that's really good value in the 5th. And then Skylar Gill-Howard was one of my favorite day 3 type of players. He was a 90-plus for me in the draft score, man. So Skylar Gill-Howard, I like him at defensive tackle as a day 3 sleeper, 6'1", 290, extremely productive, and had just an awesome year at Texas Tech as a transfer last year. He was awesome before he got hurt.
The other reason you liked Abney more than maybe the athleticism is he's a little grabby.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay. The grabby. I like all those grabby corners.
Got it tight.
I like to think that they just get away with it. Kendrick Law, by the way, too, one of the best yak receivers in the draft class. Actually, I got to check. I have something in my notes here that Lions fans might like. I think it was him. Let me make sure. Because he was, what did he average? 9.2 yards after the catch. Like the only thing he was good at. He was used at, that's the role he was used at.
Yeah.
It was yards after the catch.
Perhaps a better way of phrasing it.
That was his role. But my note because I just write notes on these players all throughout college football and then come back to them, and I sometimes forget some of them. Cole Kubelik, who covers the SEC, right? He called him the best run-blocking wide receiver since Hines Ward. That's what Cole in 2024. It's in my notes. 2024, Cole Kubelik. I got to write this down. I got to remember it. Called Kendrick Law the best run-blocking wide receiver since Hines Ward. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But he's a yak superstar and run blocker, apparently, with pretty good workouts, 42-inch vertical, and he could scoot.
You ever wonder how good of a run-blocking wide receiver Hines Ward actually was and how much of it is built off the lore of just decleating somebody's face as they run in the opposite direction of him?
I think it's completely overrated, but that's me.
It's just I'm curious. I don't know the answer to that question because nobody was, charting that kind of stuff back then.
I feel like the people are going to call this a BB minus type of draft. The composite's going to be
people don't love solid. People like teams that shoot for the fences, even though actually solid is probably smarter sometimes.
All right, let's go to the Green Bay Packers. Of course, we have to start with their first rounder was Micah Parsons. Next year's first rounder was Micah Parsons as well. So they gave up the 2 1s to get Micah Parsons. They didn't pick until pick 52. Brandon Cece, the cornerback out of South Carolina. They go with Chris McClellan, the defensive tackle out of Missouri, in round 3. They go Dennis Sutton, DDS, at pick 120, round 4. Jager Burton, the center out of Kentucky, in round 5. Damani Jackson, cornerback out of Alabama, in round 6. And then Trey Smack, Florida kicker.
Can't believe there's a kicker called Trey Smack.
With their 2nd, 6th rounder. Just a Packers draft here. What'd you think?
It is.
About the Packers?
It is definitely a Packers draft. I would differ. So this is where I think there's a difference between, the Packers not having a first-round pick and the Bengals not having a first-round pick. Technically, it's the same in that they both sent it for a veteran player, blah, blah, blah. But the Packers did this, a year ago and they just consequently don't have a first-round draft pick anymore. The Bengals did this deep into the draft process and effectively, as part of their draft decision-making, decided to send the 10th overall pick for a player because there was nobody they wanted. I think that's a different, decision-making roadmap than this, which just decided, some time ago we wanted Michael Parsons, and now this is the result of that. But Cisse, I think, was a good pick for them. Like, again, the Packers have a type. I've referenced it a bunch of times during this draft process. DraftAxis.com is Kent Wyrock's site that he's sort of quantified tendencies by various personnel guys, general managers. So Brian Gutekunst, you can see, it's not that they use relative athletic score one for one. I'm sure they're not firing up the website and just taking the guys that are, 10 and beyond. But like everybody they draft has a spectacular relative athletic score, right? They go for athletes at every position.
Where was his?
Cisse's?
Yeah. Because my workout number has him as a 73 out of 100, which is fine. That includes, arm, wing. It includes the 40, runs a 4.41, good vertical, good broad, below average shuttle at 4.33. I thought he was pretty smooth on the field, though. Footwork, transitions, and everything. One of the interesting data points on Cisse, is it? Sorry.
Yeah.
Brandon Cisse. He was better in zone than in one-on-one coverage. I think you saw that when he's sitting on top of routes, breaking downhill. He'll lose track of receivers a little bit down the field, back shoulders, usually keeps in contact, but I think he's got some catch point questions. Made some plays on the ball, but also, gave up a few catches as well.
9.25.
9.25. So my numbers, workout-wise, are going to be a little bit lower as far as projecting him to production-wise at the next level. I got him as a 68 overall.
Yeah.
It's fine.
I'm not going to lie. Looking at his RAS, I don't really understand why it's a 9.25 based off the numbers that make it up.
That does happen sometimes. Like
is.
even your guy, the African guy that
Bernard
having, when he's that far below average in the agility stuff, and then it's super high. Like sometimes the eye test.
Yeah,
the number.
I don't know how the numbers get compiled to make that, but the height with the size stuff, right, is just good. It's average. It's orange. The only agility number he has is bad, and then the other stuff is, it's good, but it's not off the chart spectacular. So I'm not quite sure how that adds up to a 9.25, but I'm not questioning the data.
So then the Packers.
My point being, the Packers draft guys with a high RAS, and apparently he's got one.
So the Packers generally, cornerback questions over these last couple of years, I didn't think they addressed it a ton last year. I think it maybe came back to bite down the stretch, but he'll be right in there competing with Benjamin St-Juste, Carrington Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon. I think the fact that he's better playing in zone than in man matches what Green Bay wants to do defensively, and I think that's a pretty good fit there, and take him in a good spot where you want him. And by the way, with the Micah Parsons thing, I get what you're saying as far as like the Bengals evaluated this draft class and went and got Dexter Lawrence, which is different than trading 2 1s for Micah Parsons. But when you're sitting there on draft day and you're going through the grades and everything, you have to just remember that you're missing your one because you had one of the most impactful players in the entire NFL on your roster and coming back next year. So you have to at least throw that into the mix here. Do you have Chris McClellan? Was one of the earlier, quote, reaches, I would say, right, at defensive tackle?
Yeah. So you're going to make me, fire
I'll
up
find mine.
The page that I already closed.
I figured you just have it open the entire thing.
I mean,
I saw him. I have it 124 on my board here.
Remind me where he's from?
Missouri.
Okay.
Number 7 on Missouri. He's fine. I think you could definitely find some plays. He's got quick hands, and he can make an impact. Made some impactful plays in the run game, which I thought was, he's pretty good there. He's got average.
He's only a 6.
He's what?
He's only a 6.
6 what?
RAS?
Oh, no, I was just asking about the consensus board, not the.
Oh, the consensus board.
Yeah.
Different
I had him at 124 on the consensus board. He goes in the 80s here, right? So we'll get the kicking evaluation as well in a minute. But I thought McClellan went a little bit higher than expected.
108 on the Arif Hassan consensus board.
Yeah, so he went a little bit higher, not bad. But yeah, he's a guy that you're not going to play a ton at nose tackle. He's got some anchor issues, but he's he could be disruptive in the run game. He's very similar to the other players that they have there. They're Devontae Wyatt, right?
Yep.
Not really an anchor guy, more of a disruptive defensive tackle type. They bring in Javon Hargrave, Carl Brooks, just another similar. He's a bigger than those guys, but I don't think he's like your TJ Slayton that they had a couple years ago that you want, being a force as far as, eating up double teams or anything. That's not really McClellan's game, but solid.
Now
Solid
tell us
play.
about the dentist, since you've been working on this nickname for so long. Sell it to us.
So his RAS is off the charts, but it doesn't always show up on the field. He's a fascinating player because I think he may have been listed in the 270s and he was more of a in the 260s, but he's kind of a power player. He wins with length. There's some TJ Parker to his game where I think you're left wanting more, especially when you saw the workout numbers. I think people that evaluated him before the workout numbers were like, he's got a little trouble turning the corner. He'll win with this stab move.
Yeah, but
and
instead
with
he
a
has
rip
a
move.
6'9" 3-cone.
Yeah.
Like, in addition to being a 4'6", 40 guy, and you're like, wow, this is off the charts athleticism.
So this works both ways, right? It's like I'm not seeing this on the field as far as this nimbleness around the corner, this agility around the corner, but he's got this good workout. Maybe that's some perceived upside there. But for a fourth-round player, that's a good, productive player. I think on this defensive line, especially if Lucas Van Ness is not going to be the future opposite Micah Parsons, like DDS can be your low-end, edge rush starter opposite Micah Parsons. You'd still probably want to upgrade this in a year and maybe get a little more pass rush juice off the edge. But a guy that's been pretty productive at Penn State, but like a TJ Parker, overall production profile's pretty good. You're left wanting a little bit more, especially after you see him work out really well.
Not just work out really well, but the measurements across the board. Like, okay, as you said, he was lighter than he was supposed to be, like 250 something at the combine, 261 at his pro day. But he's over 6'5" with long arms and a wingspan. Like, the NFL still covets length on the edge. As much as you got guys like Cassius Howell proving that they will still draft you reasonably high if you've got short arms and you don't have the length. In their heart of hearts, the NFL still wants a guy that's 6'5" with 33-inch arms and and has all the athleticism. Like, that's what they want.
Yeah, and look, my production profile likes him, especially as a fourth-round pick. This ends up being one of my favorite picks of the draft because he's an 83 for me, getting that in round 4. It's just my film assessment wasn't as good as the production assessment. Kind of like Parker. Like, I came away wanting more. Like, he's got the long arm power. He's got the rip move. Powerful striker in the run game. He could jack up blockers. He'll get caught playing high a little bit because he's 6'6", and everybody who plays 6'6" gets caught playing high sometimes. Right. But I really like this as a fourth-round pick. My combine number's a 95 on him. Again, that's to project it to production at the next level, not just saying how good of an athlete he is. You just don't always see it on film. But I think I always talk about stealing starters on day 3. This is potential starter on day 3.
Yeah.
I think he's maybe competing with Van Ness right now and Barron Sorrell and what they have there, but competing right now and then maybe in year 2 is locked in as the starter. And you still, you might want to upgrade it a little bit, but he's part of the rotation at least.
And I think his college production kind of shows some of those question marks or reservations about him as well, because he's only ever been solid and good, not great, which at that size and athleticism, like players without much sort of football playing ability have been very productive because they're 6'6", 260 with that kind of athleticism profile, and they're just better athletes than the guys trying to block them. For the dentist to have kind of only been solid to good but never dominant, the dominance comes in individual games where he'll rack up like a dozen pressures and 2 sacks against a guy that literally can't deal with him. And then he'll have a bunch of games where he gets 2 pressures, doesn't do anything. So I think you're seeing that kind of sort of, indirectly shown up in his production profile. Even though you look at the overall numbers, they look great. Like, if you dive a little bit deeper, you do see, I think, some of the reasons that he slipped as far as he did.
Beyond that, I think I'd below average numbers on Burton at center and Damani Jackson. Damani might have been really low. Did I say that on the show? The cornerback out of Alabama. Yeah, I have it as an 8.
An 8
out of 100.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. I said this on the show, and I'm trying to look back through Packers drafts for whatever it's worth, I know you people tune in to hear our opinions and everything, and we appreciate that. The Packers have been a good team. They've been very, very good over the last few years. Good organization. I don't think I've liked one of their drafts in a long time. For whatever it's worth, different vibes.
They
Different
do tend
feel.
to work out reasonably well, though.
No, I know that. That's what I'm saying. I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just saying, for me personally, though,
Yeah.
I'm actually looking through their history.
Yeah.
And the last time I liked one of their here's what I like. They draft 10 players, they draft 12 players. So, like, when you do that, that's going to work out
So that's
a
the
lot
thing.
better.
They've actually been pretty good at it.
2024, 23, and 22, they had 10 plus picks, right?
Yeah.
And so that I like the strategy, the way they double up.
Mm-hmm.
They love to double up on positions and double dip at corner and receiver, and they've had great success tight end a couple years ago with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. I just haven't, I didn't love Van Ness, Musgrave,
Yeah.
Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft.
It's interesting. Ironically,
it's worked out pretty well.
The drafts they've had that I like the best at the time don't tend to work out.
Yeah.
Like the ones that I liked, I remember loving the draft where they had Demarius Randall, Quentin Rollins, Ty Montgomery. That draft, I don't know if any of those guys worked out long term, right? Like
So-
they each flashed a period of time where it looked like they would. It is interesting, though, because they're one of the more definable teams in the NFL in terms of how they draft, right?
Yeah.
They have a very specific type of player across the board. You can eliminate a whole bunch of people from what is the Green Bay Packers draft board. You can see it every year. This is the type of player they end up drafting. And, yeah, it is kind of fascinating that that you don't tend to love those players, but actually they have a pretty good hit rate overall.
My favorite draft for theirs going backwards is probably 2018 because they got Jair Alexander and Josh Jackson. But Jackson didn't work out at all. Jair was great. But beyond that, that was when they tripled up at receiver, got MVS and Equinemius and everything. Like, it was an okay draft. Jair is the gem, obviously. But
Right.
So my point is, if you're a Packers fan tuning in for analysis, like, I have not complimented your team in almost a decade, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm right. I'm just like, I just have a different flavor, I think, than the Packers. I like the denied Dennis Sutton pick. I thought McClellan was a little high. Cisse was fine in the second round, so I just have no strong opinions either way, other than I would almost always go somewhere different than where the Packers did.
Right.
But they've won more football games than me. So
Indeed.
Here they are.
Now, critically, at the press conference, Bill Huber asked Brian Gutekunst how they scout kickers. So we have that answer for us.
How do you scout a kicker? Are you guys?
Now, that's one place.
So it's a simple process.
That is one place where I absolutely relate to the Packers in kicker analysis, is the kick through the uprights.
Yeah. Did it go in? Yes or no?
Yeah. And then,
I think there's probably more to it than that.
hope he does it for us
Right.
as well.
I think you would want to. I don't know if you want to dive right into like the technique side of things, but I think our kick strength would be part of it. Leg strength, right? That's probably got to be part of it rather than just
did it
the
go
kick
through the
post?
uprights and from how far?
Right. Did it make it 70 yards? That would be another part of my evaluation process too.
So that's the Packers draft. Like, do you feel the same way? Like, we just don't
Yeah, I don't. Again,
vibe with the Packers draft
yes,
as much.
It is interesting.
Other than the volume piece, I really like the tactics behind it
yes.
more than the players, I would say.
Exactly. Their evaluation process on players definitely doesn't seem to mesh with mine. But again, I'm not even saying like you said, they're right more often than they're wrong. They've been a pretty decent drafting team overall. Maybe not the top drafting team or anything, but they've been a pretty solid drafting team, and at least as many of the people that we didn't like have worked out versus the ones where we did like and they haven't worked out. It's just we don't mesh. Like, I hated the Quay Walker pick, right? But I like the Devontae Wyatt pick. There's no logic, rhyme, or reason as to whether I'm going to like or dislike Packers draft players.
That actually might be a fun off-season thing too, is just to go team by team through their last 5 drafts or whatever.
Right.
And
I remember
what did
not
I like
liking.
and not like.
I didn't like the Lucas Van Ness pick. I did like the Musgrave pick. It's all over the place.
My favorite pick for the Packers the last few years is Edgerrin Cooper in the second round,
Right.
2024. So at least we were on the same page there.
I think my favorite was Javon Bullard, the same draft.
Yeah. No, actually, that was the last draft. I liked those 2 picks. So anyway, that's your Packers. We got one more team. That's it.
Yeah.
Minnesota Vikings are up next. This is This is a fun one to at least discuss.
Yes.
Because there's
And we did that already.
some stories.
If
we
you
did.
go to the video tab of the YouTube channel, you can hear us talk with Matthew Collar from Purple Insider about the Vikings draft, because it was an interesting one.
It really was. So it all started with Caleb Banks at pick 18. Definitely listened to Matt and what he was anticipating and what we did. We knew that the Dylan Thieneman thing.
Everyone else thought Thieneman was going to be the pick.
Yeah.
Collar said, to be fair, it was sort of like taking the field. It was like when Tiger Woods used to be playing. Yeah. It's like, is Tiger Woods going to win this major or the field, right? So I think Matthew was taking the field as opposed to Dylan Thieneman, but Thieneman was definitely the expected pick by basically everybody, and they didn't go that way.
So they go Caleb Banks, defensive tackle out of Florida at pick 18. They come back in round 2 with Jake Golday, the linebacker out of Cincinnati. They go big citrus with their first third-rounder, Dominique Orange out of Iowa State. Their second third-rounder is Caleb Tiernan, offensive tackle, maybe guard out of Northwestern. Jacoby Thomas. What?
Maybe guard.
Maybe guard
with those arms.
With his
You're
tiny
guard,
arms.
son.
Jacoby Thomas, the safety out of Miami, was their third rounder. Max Bredesen, tight end, also listed as a fullback in some places here in round 5 out of Michigan. Charles Demings, the long corner out of Stephen F. Austin, one of the, 4 FCS players, I believe, that was drafted in this class in the entire NFL. He's their second, fifth rounder. Damon Claiborne, the 6th rounder, running back out of Wake Forest. And then Gavin Gerhardt, the center out of Cincinnati. Let's discuss the top of the draft. Your joke was Brian Flores, who we've already talked about having maybe a lot of personnel say, getting his way with 3 straight defensive picks here. Caleb Banks, Jake Golday, and Big Citrus.
Yeah, and I hadn't sort of realized this part before, but Matthew Collar was talking about how few of their high draft picks in recent years have gone on defense. Like it's been almost all offense. The only significant pick of substance was the Dallas Turner pick. That you would say that's a Flores pick, right? So, we were joking. Look, Kwesi was fired late in the process, right? After he left the Senior Bowl was when Kwesi was fired. So, you said this is the first year that James Gladstone in Jacksonville has been running his own draft effectively start to finish. Well, the Minnesota Vikings are rudderless right now. They've got Rob Brzezinski, who's been a cap guy for the team and various other things for like 20 plus years, is nominally in charge, but it's being termed a committee. It's a collaborative process, but that doesn't work at the end. You can't collaborate. Somebody's in charge, right? And who's in charge? Who's the alpha in the room?
Rob Brzezinski.
Apparently, according to the first 3 picks, it's Brian Flores. Brian Flores has the conch, and he was making all the picks, at least until somebody distracted him with something and they got Caleb Tiernan in there.
Before we get into Banks and what he is as a player, had Kwesi's listed as like he was the analytics GM, and it's not. He wasn't necessarily. He didn't act like that draft wise. Like it wasn't like when you look at the draft picks and it's like, this is exactly what the analytics people would have done. This is.
If anything, it was the other way around.
So it's not like every single pick you're like, yep, that's exactly what everybody would have done, whatever. If it was like that, and then the first pick once he's out the building was Caleb Banks, then that would be a funny story, right?
Yeah.
They went from like the computer's making all the picks to give me this 6'6", 330-pound monster who tosses humans. I don't care about the injury history. I don't care he's only played 1,000 snaps across 5 seasons. I don't care that he gets hasn't made a lot of tackles. I don't care that he doesn't have a lot of sacks. I just care that this is an athletic freak who can get there. It felt like this is a scouting pick. It's a very scouty type of pick. So it would have been a fun dichotomy. But look, we said there's a wide range of where Banks could go, right? Is it in the first round? I thought ultimately he might end up in the late first or into the second, but all the way at 18 here. And as you've said, all the way along the process, if you just show the highlight reel, man, it is spectacular.
It really is. Like, that's the thing. If you just looked at the high-end plays, you would say this guy's going top 5 in this draft. And coming out of the Combine, remember, he had the crazy good Senior Bowl. Then he went to the Combine, had an amazing workout, apparently on a broken foot that he didn't know about until after the fact. But, like, fractured his foot again and put this crazy workout together. His name, he was one of those players that top sort of half dozen players, like who won the Combine? And Caleb Banks was one of those guys. And coming out of that, I was like, this guy, he may end up going top 10. Like that size, that movement skill profile, the wins on tape, the highlight reel, and the Combine that he just put together, that may have him going top 10. And then I don't know if it was because the foot injury happened and it's not just hey, he's injured his foot. It's, hey, that's now like 4 injuries in the same foot for a guy that's 6'6", 330 pounds, that the hype cooled off almost immediately after that. And he didn't end up going top 10, but he did go at 18 to the Vikings. And I mean, I get it. It is. I do think it's one of the biggest boom or bust swings in the first round, but you can't argue with what he could be. I mean, it's obvious. Like, just watching him move for a couple of snaps, you're like, I mean, this dude could be something pretty special.
The good plays against the run, and when I look at good and bad plays against the run, I'm saying, like, are you defeating blocks? Are you finishing plays? It's not just him defeating blocks. It is him literally throwing 300-pounders to the ground.
Right.
Over and over and over again. The good plays are unbelievable. He's got an absurdly low run stop percentage, like 0.7th percentile. It's insanely low. So he has not made a ton of actual tackles. One of the other stats I track, actually, Sam, tackle percentage. So the percentage of plays in which the player just made a tackle as a percentage of snaps. So it's not tackle totals. It's kind of an interesting number. First percentile, just tackle percentage.
Yeah.
Now, look, the Florida scheme is asking him to disrupt more, and they're not. And this goes back to, like, if you're trying to make Caleb Banks' case, you might say Gervon Dexter a couple years ago wasn't as freaky of an athlete, but a similar. He's asked to just, eat up blocks and not make plays, didn't have the best production profile coming out of Florida. He started to become a decent player for the Bears, but has similar pad level issues and anchor issues, and that's kind of where Banks is. Even at the Senior Bowl, when we're there in person, the best plays are him throwing dudes to the ground, and then the next play, he's getting knocked off the ball 10 yards.
Yeah.
So there's so much inconsistency to his game, but he's got a pretty good pass rush profile and all the tools where if you just kind of let him go. I think he's also really good on stunts and twists at just setting dudes up, right? At just using his size and his length to eat up blockers as a pass rusher as well. The question is going to be the 4 injuries to the same foot, and the fact that he only played 929 snaps across 5 years, in part because they run a heavy rotation at Florida. Then he had the injuries, and he barely played in 2025. So it's a fun pick, man. Again, like, as a fan, I just like tracking these things. I just like keeping track of when the Vikings draft this guy a little bit higher than expected, with all these what ifs to his game, but some of the highest quote unquote upside of anybody in this draft. And I'm a film and production guy is the most important thing. But you want to explain away what happened the same way you do with Trayvon Walker years ago, right? Freak athlete who didn't have great production. Well, why? He's playing 4i. He's playing you want to at least explain it away. Now, when you add that all up, for me, he's a 34 in my draft score. So I wouldn't do it. But I'm intrigued to see someone else try and see what happens with Banks here.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted before, sometime the week before the draft, that, like, keep your GM away from his highlight reel, right? Because that's going to make you go, I want this guy. I need him. I got to take him. And I overall kind of agree with you that he feels more like the risk side of the risk reward than the reward side. But honestly, every single time I watch the highlight reel, I'm like, I'm in. Give me. It's like, I don't know. He's fascinating because I definitely see it. Like, it's hard. It's impossible not to see it. But I mean, even just looking at his college, like, look at PFF grading, look at pass rushing productivity, look at run stop percent, like any metric that shows any kind of production at the college level is not where you would expect it to be for a dude who's 6'6", 330 and can move like that, right? Like, that profile, again, just knowing those things at the college level should be good enough for you to be one of the more impactful players on the field at any given time. And even if you factor in that he played less than 1,000 snaps total, the 1,000 snaps that he played weren't as dominant as they should have been. So you're expecting him to then scale that up at the NFL level against better players. It feels unlikely. However, clearly the ability is there based off just watching him play for 2 minutes. And then also now you have to factor in he's going to a Brian Flores defense. And that's the other aspect here is what can Flores do with him? And, now comparing that to the players that they've had in the building that haven't done much at defensive tackle. Like when they went and brought in the 2 veterans, Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave, neither of whom did anything in that defense.
Every year I wonder, based off the personnel moves, how the Flores defense is going to change. And it hasn't changed a ton. But last year my question was, all right, they've or the last couple of years, now they're loaded at edge rusher. Like, remember when it started, it was like they had no edge rushers.
Right.
He's got to use the smoke and mirrors and create pressure. Then they loaded up on edge rushers, and it was like, all right, are they going to go 4-man rush now? A little bit more. Now they've loaded up on big-bodied defensive tackles. They went from the undersized defensive tackles, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Allen, more of the pass rush types. Now they have Banks at 330, and now they have Big Citrus at 325, but more of a fire hydrant-y type of nose tackle type who's supposed to be your hold-the-point type, and I think he's okay at that. He's actually more of a nimble mover for 325, not really going to push the pocket a ton, but he's pretty good in the run game. So it's fascinating, seeing these weapons for Flores and what they're going to do. Golday is the guy I'm really interested in. The more I watched him, the more I loved him. Renner was early on him. I think he's like your modern-day linebacker that you can trust in the box in a 6-man front. Now, ironically, the Vikings use as many 8-man fronts as anybody in the NFL right now, but I think he's the type of guy that you can trust to play the run, but he's also athletic enough to get really good depth in zone, to work top to bottom in zone, trigger with his eyes, make plays. He's a former defensive end way back in the day, pass rusher, so he's got some blitz ability here. So that's why I'm saying he's like your modern-day 3-down backer that could play the run, play zone coverage, blitz, get after the QB. I really like Golday here from Cincinnati.
Yeah, and consequently, because he's a former defensive end, is still relatively young and inexperienced at the position, at linebacker. The athleticism, the size, like the range, it's all there for him. Again, I'm kind of excited now. The idea of plugging these players into a Brian Flores defense is becoming more. It's kind of like it's a difficult thing to analyze, right? Because like you were saying, there's nobody in the NFL that you trust more with a 4-2 receiver than Ben Johnson, right? But that's not a reason the pick is good. That's just a reason to be excited by that guy within this offense because of the coach, right? This is sort of similar. It's like, 3 defensive players who have pretty interesting profiles. Well, now they're being given to Brian Flores and say, well, what can Flores do with those guys? That's exciting, but that's not necessarily a reason that, Caleb Banks at 18 in a vacuum is a good thing to do.
Beyond that, draft-wise, do you have anything on Big Citrus?
Big Citrus, well, look, it's the coolest nickname in the draft. Admittedly, I like the nickname more than I like the player. The player is more solid than spectacular. He's got pretty good power, pretty good quickness for his size. He doesn't bring much as a pass rusher. He is more of a space-occupying type of player. I wanted to like him more because his nickname was so awesome, but he's just solid. Yeah,
I hear you. I'm kind of with you on Citrus. I thought he would hold the point a little bit better, too. Like you see the Iowa game, they could with Logan Jones.
That's the thing. Like, he's not even spectacular at the thing that I was expecting him to be spectacular at. It's like,
He actually doesn't, like, he could jack up some blockers and make some plays. He doesn't actually anchor as well as I thought he would for his size, but we'll see what ends up happening there. Caleb Tiernan's interesting because he's 6'7" with Hutch arms.
Preposterous.
Smaller than Hutch arms.
Smaller than, what was his arm like? I need the official number. But he's 6'7".
His 32 and 3/8.
I think, weren't they? Yeah.
That's what I have. Yeah, 3/8.
Yeah, which is shorter.
First percentile.
It's shorter arms than I have at 6'7".
Yeah.
He is, he was 6'7" and a half, 323 pounds, and his arms at the combine, where the guy shortchanges everybody, they were 32 and a quarter inches.
And then he came up to...
Yes. Then he gained 1/8 of an inch at his pro day.
So, yeah, he's fine. I think that's a good third-round pick. He moves pretty well in pass pro, gets a little lungy at times, but I think that's he's the highest end of your potential swing tackles in this draft, in the Austin Barber range, and then some other, Markel Bells and everything. I think Tiernan's, in that category. I think that's good value where they get him in the third.
Yes, it is. It's a good value. He's a good player. It is just fascinating. I can't get by the arm length thing. It's remarkable. Like those for that size, it's unbelievable.
How your arm's so short when you're 6'7"? I don't know.
It doesn't make any sense.
There was some big fans of Charles Demings. He's just a long corner in round 5. Another one interesting to see if Flores can do something with him. Small school player with some tools and some traits. And then Damon Claiborne, kind of a jitterbug running back. I was scouting him for my transfer portal clients a couple years ago. There was a thought that he might leave Wake Forest. He did not, but I was doing due diligence on him, and he's pretty good in space with the ball. He's not going to run between the tackles all that well, but jitterbug is my.
You don't hear jitterbug that often anymore.
That's what he is.
Yeah.
Bounces around, and he's really undersized. And
he's got something
to him.
Yeah, jitterbug. He's got that amazing twitch, both in every direction. Like not just he's got burst in a straight line, but he's also got that lateral, agility and lateral ability to juke significant distances in quick order, and that's the jitterbug part, right? He can bounce in a bunch of different places quickly.
Everyone expected the Vikings to take the safety at the top. They go Jacoby Thomas with one of their third rounders, 6'1", 200 from Miami. Ran a 4.57. This is not Thieneman, right? It's not your elite athlete, and he's been.
But honestly, maybe are we replacing Harrison Smith? I mean, that's a closer comp to Harrison Smith than Thieneman is in terms of play style.
One really good year at Miami. It was last year. They made their run to the college football playoff final. Thomas was a big part of that. Their secondary was a big question actually going into that season, but they had Keontae Scott, they had Thomas, they had a bunch of dudes step up, and he was a big part of that. So they get him in the third round. Again, so I think there's I think it's a decent mix of, you have guys like Thomas and Demings who can contribute and maybe develop. You have Tiernan as your swing tackle, maybe sneaks in as a future starter. I think Golday could be plug and play. And then you have the high upside of Banks. It's a diversified portfolio, I'll say, at least for the Vikings draft here.
Yeah, and they hit needs as well. I mean, there's a path to the field for a lot of those guys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if you're talking sort of what Bredesen can do from there's a place to play snaps at that. Demings could see the field. Claiborne could see the field. Like, there's all these guys, almost without exception, could actually end up seeing the field for them and contribute.
Last thing, they did trade Jonathan Grenard.
Yes.
For a third rounder.
Third rounder this year and a third rounder next year.
That ended up being Jacoby Thomas. They have another 3 coming in next year. That's not going to feel great on the surface. I know Dallas Turner is supposed to completely, step in and take over for Jonathan Grenard. And I guess from like a overall team building effort, your former first rounder heading into year 3 makes sense. And Thomas did some nice things. Turner did some nice things last year. A lot of his big plays, like unblocked, forced fumbles. I still don't necessarily trust him winning one-on-one, certainly not as much as Grenard, but this would be the time for him to step up. And, did it feel like the Vikings needed to move on from that level of salary right now? I don't know. It's like they're in transition, man. They're in transition. They're trying to do the competitive rebuild again, but that's a step back in the short term, I think, at least,
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a financial move, right? It's a we're tight against the salary cap thing. Grenard wants a contract redone. We're not paying that, so we're gonna give it away to a team that is willing to do that. And the Eagles are the classic team that's part of the how we do it thing. They always have just enough flexibility, or they're willing to give themselves just enough flexibility to be able to do something like that, whereas other teams aren't. I think that's a mistake. I understand they're tight against the salary cap. I think he's a good enough player that is the type you need to find a way of making it work, right? He's not yet 29. He'll be 29 this season. I understand you want to give Dallas Turner, but Dallas Turner played, I think, more snaps than he did last year. Like, there's a way of getting the 3 guys on the field at the same time. Maybe Turner has to be the guy that gets the Grenard snaps, and that's the sort of those are the 2 that have to rotate, and Van Ginkel's his own unique, screen picking off freak show on the other side, and you can't really ask Turner or Grenard to do that. But there's a way of getting those 3 guys on the field at the same time, in my opinion, and Grenard is too good to just let walk out of the door for a pair of third-round picks because you're tight against the salary cap. So, yeah, that feels a bit rough, I think.
Check out our conversation with Matthew Collar. It's on the channel right now. We had some great conversations yesterday. We decided to turn our Saturday into, let's do a little bit of recap with Nick Underhill on the Saints, Matthew Collar on the Vikings. We had Jordan Rodriguez breaking down the Rams situation. I thought she brought great insight into McVay and Les Snead and maybe their thought process on Ty Simpson. So check all of that out. It's all on the YouTube channel here, probably under the video section for most of those.
Along with the best value picks of the draft, the biggest reaches of the draft. We covered some of that as well.
We're also going to get some of our favorite draft friends to give their recaps at some point this week, hopefully for Thursday's show. That's it for us today as far as the North this week. So we're a quarter of the way through the league. What's so funny?
You were remarking, Walt was busy or whatever during the draft, so he wasn't in the chat the whole time. It's just the last couple of minutes of Walt messages in the chat. It makes me remind we missed something. We didn't have Walt in the chat, and we missed out on a sequence that was remembering 1976 that was talking about salmon roasting in the oven today and, and something else.
The
Like, you don't get
1970s. He's talking about his Raiders destroying the Vikings'
right.
O-line.
We just didn't have anybody talking about the 1970s and grilled meat products at the same time.
Walt, do
in
you
the
not
chat.
even watch the draft? Are you just in bed by then? You're just an early riser? Like, that's it? Love it. So we're a quarter of the way through the league.
Yeah.
The plan this week is to go every day through Thursday. So we'll do our usual Monday morning at 9 a.m. We got 2 more divisions tomorrow. We'll do the bonus Tuesday. We don't usually do Tuesday, but we'll do Tuesday at 9 a.m. with 2 more divisions, and then Wednesday 9 a.m. with 2 more divisions, and then Thursday we're trying to get the Lance Erlines of the world and maybe some other analysts to break down their drafts and their assessments. So we'll try to get a few more opinions on the show by Thursday. Mm-hmm. And by Thursday, maybe the draft wrapped up. And then the off-season ideas are flowing. I think maybe the assessment of teams' drafts over like the last 5 years, their draft strategies, what we liked, didn't like, where we were right or wrong, going team by team. I always have ridiculous, grand ideas that are tough to execute, but it would be kind of fun as we talked through the Packers one. Yeah, we should do an early 2027 mock. I'll pose the question to the chat: is Arch Manning QB1?
Does he have to come out this year?
No.
Or is he still got? No, he's not going to come out this year. It's
gonna
going to be the
go back
greatest
to
beta switch at all
He's
time.
just going to keep going back
for
to Texas.
for multiple years. It's going to be Arch Manning's number one.
Manning's
and then he's going to stay at
always
school the whole way.
They want to start for 4 years.
Yeah.
He probably wants 3 full years.
Also,
starting.
he's quarterback of Texas.
Yeah.
That must be worth a lot in NIL. Why would the guy want to leave? Also, he hasn't won the national title yet.
Fair point.
You keep swinging until you win the Natty.
I haven't run my college numbers yet, but I think Texas is going to be up there for me. I think Texas and Notre Dame right now.
I'm putting it out there now. That's my way too early mock draft prediction for next year, is that Arch Manning will not be in the draft.
There we go. You heard it here first. All right. That was fun. Good show. We'll be going division by division Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again tomorrow. More Check the Mic at 9 a.m.